All right, it is 5:31 p.m. Monday, February 2nd. I am calling to order this work session of the Fairbanks North Star Borough School Board. As we call this meeting to order, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we are residing on the traditional lands of the Dene people. Our mission statement: as a community, we create supportive learning environments where all students thrive. Ms. Richardson, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Doran,
Here.
Miss Julian,
Here.
Miss Hewitt,
Here.
Miss Hull,
Here.
Miss Maple,
Here.
Mr. Burgess.
Here.
Thank you. The board has a quorum.
Thank you.
And I'm here too.
Oh.
My apologies,
Okay.
Miss Hubbard, Carol
Okay.
Hubbard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So on our agenda tonight is proposed budget work. Dr. Meinert and Mr. DeGraw, our Chief Operations Officer, will present the administration's FY27 proposed budget. I spoke with Mr. DeGraw just before the meeting. Feel free, you can repeat this if you like, Andy, but feel free to ask questions as we go. As they come up, and then we will also have an opportunity to ask more questions at the end of the presentation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Meinert and Mr. DeGraw.
All right. Thank you, President Burgess. Looking forward to tonight's conversations and the proposed budget work sessions we have ahead of us. It's great to be in a posture of talking about restorations and investments into our students rather than millions of dollars worth of cuts. And that's based on the hard work that this board and past boards have done to put us on a solid financial footing to be able to have these conversations. And so really excited to have conversations about what our vision is to restore some of the things that have been lost over the last several years due to inadequate funding of education. And so Mr. DeGraw will walk us through the proposed budget slide deck that we have this evening and look forward to the conversations that we're going to have. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Meinert. Before I jump into the slides, just want to thank a couple of people I work with closely in my office and in communications. But sitting next to me is Michelle Nilsson. She's kind of the brains behind the curtain and pulls a lot of levers and runs a lot of numbers and probably gets sick and tired of umpteen different scenarios, but she's the one that is the guru in the nuts and bolts and weeds of the softwares that we use and helps us generate different scenarios, does a ton of great work. Also, Rebecca Herbie, our executive director of communications, she did a lot of work putting these presentations together in the final budget. So appreciate their work. We will go ahead. I'll get into presentation mode here. Let's view slideshow. There we go. All right. So as Dr. Meinert mentioned, we're excited to present our budget tonight. I've been with the district. This is my 8th budget cycle, and every budget has been wrought with significant reductions and cuts due in large part to inadequate funding. And so I think, you know, we got our $700 BSA boost last year, which was a step in the right direction. It's certainly not everything we need, but it's had a significant impact in the favorable budget that we're presenting tonight. And as Dr. Meinert mentioned, the hard work and difficult decisions that have been made by boards over the last, especially couple of 3 years, have significantly contributed to the favorable budget that we have in front of us. So just, and again, as Mr. Burgess mentioned, ask questions as we go, and then again, we'll have opportunity for questions at the end as well to go back to the various slides. So just a look back at about 12-year look back on enrollment just shows kind of the scale of the decline that we've experienced over the years. Student enrollment is one of the main factors, one main drivers of state level revenue. And so that's why it's important. That's why we track it. So as high as nearly 14,000 about 10, 11 years ago, and now at our current year FY26 is at 11,200 there shown, and then we're projecting 11,042 students for the FY27 cycle. A little bit closer drill down on student enrollment the last 3 cycles. So the green is what we project for new board members. My office is required to project enrollment almost an entire year in advance. So just in November, very beginning of November, we project for next school year. So it's about a 10-month lookout to project students. The last couple of years, we've been significantly down from those. We're again projecting a decline, not quite as big of a decline. Our hope is that we're going to plateau out here and not see significant future declines going, as big a declines going forward.
We have a question for Mr. Doran.
Thank you. Just in terms of the projections, could you give a little bit more detail on how you arrived at that decrease, and particularly one of those areas is that both our current military advisory members have indicated later this year some possibilities of increases in staffing and their family needs. I do want to say that I know this is always a difficult one, and one that we don't want to overestimate, especially given our tightness of budgets. But if you could elaborate a little bit on that decline.
Yeah. So what I work hand in hand with Dr. Ott on this in our research and development department. What we do is we take current student counts at the different schools. We drill down to even grade level and class level data. We roll that information forward, and then Dr. Ott applies specific formulas to those different fields and numbers. He provides me a number, and then I take that and further develop that number. For total transparency, his numbers projected a significantly higher reduction than what we're showing here. So I ratcheted that back a little bit based in part due to factors that you mentioned, Mr. Doran. So again, we're factoring in information we're getting from our military bases. Also, what I just mentioned earlier was at some point we're figuring behind the scenes the significant declines that we've seen the last 2 years. Typically in the past, they've stopped at some point. They've kind of leveled out. So we're taking that kind of information into consideration as well. So, but that's the behind the scenes how we work with Dr. Ott. He rolls enrollments forward, applies formulas to those, and then I receive the numbers and further work them.
Follow up, Mr. Doran.
Okay. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but if you could have we gotten any updates from the military? Because even when it was mentioned, I mean, nobody knows what the federal government is going to do at this point. But anything more current, since we're coming closer to the 6 to 9 month window when they were projecting they would see these buildups?
Nothing of concrete substance. So, they continue to say in our conversations that they expect additional families to come, but that they don't have hard numbers for us. And that's as recent as the task force visit to Arctic Light. I had another conversation with Colonel Campbell there about this very discussion and student enrollment. And that's something that they're very interested in because they want more troops to come to Fort Wainwright and families to come with them. But they don't have a good idea of the amount of students that will come with those troops.
Thank you.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you. So just to piggyback on Mr. Doran's questions around the enrollment drop, if I'm doing the numbers, I see that from 2022, 2023 to this projection for next year, we're saying right now that we project that if we look at total enrollment decline since 2022, 2023, that it would be about 12%. And it looks like in hearing that Dr. Ott got really granular and recommended even a lower number, but also understanding that we do know that things will eventually balance out. Would you characterize the number in front of us as being a number that has a little bit of calculated and safe risk in it?
Yeah, I would say it's a cautiously optimistic number with a certain amount of risk built into that. Yeah, because would I bet that we're going to come in at or above that number based on the last couple of years? No, we could be slightly under there, but there's certainly other factors that we'll get into more in the presentation, like fund balance, that allows us to take a little bit more risk on projections. So, and just as a final thought to Mr. Doran's question and an add on to Dr. Minert's responses, regardless of what stated needs are up in advance, and then regardless of what's in our budget, we always do what's called the 10-day count at the beginning of the school year in August, and we'll stand ready to provide military schools whatever staffing resources they need if we were to see some kind of a buildup that would be awesome. And if there was increased needs there, the district would stand ready to provide those resources to those military connected schools. So similar to enrollment trends, we show the general fund revenue trend, and it's a similar pattern, a significant decline there in 22, 23, directly related to the pandemic, and then a subsequent rebound based on increasing one-time and BSA revenue from the state, as well as local revenue increases from the borough. So settling there in our projected budget at 27, just under 200 million, and we'll go over those numbers a little more in detail here in a minute. So fund balance, we'll do a review of fund balance here. Just start the conversation. Certainly that topic is trending here in the borough, and wanted to provide the board some information and provide some context just so we can understand the numbers the best way possible. Certainly a complicated topic, and we'll continue to have discussions around this going forward. So the FY27 proposed budget reflects a stronger than anticipated fund balance than we anticipated 6 months ago, 9 months ago during the last budget cycle. There were three main contributing factors to that increase in fund balance. First one was the largest. We've experienced a significant decline of enrollees in our district self-funded health plan, due in large part to reductions in staffing FTEs over the last several years. That provided approximately $5 million in additional savings beyond what we had anticipated. The second one is also significant, higher federal impact aid revenue. Impact aid is extremely difficult to predict in advance. When I first arrived at the district, we received approximately $20 million in federal impact aid. Within 2 years, that had reduced down to 8. So from 20 to 8, pretty big range. We were budgeting in the $16 million range. It dropped quickly to 8. We dropped those budget amounts down to 14, 13, 12. And now they've bumped back up to the $15, $16 million range. So we're adjusting that revenue in the FY27 budget back up to the just shy of $16 million, I believe. But we certainly received more last year than the 12, just shy of 13 that we had budgeted. And then the last item, our costs lowered more than anticipated due to the contracting out of custodial services. So directly linked to vacancies that we experienced, as even before the decision was made by the board, leading up to the decision, vacancies started to occur. And then once the decision was made, vacancies increased as we progressed through the year. And so we lowered our cost, incurred actual costs approximately $2 million lower than anticipated during FY25.
Okay. Question from Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you could explain a little bit more about how the impact aid is, what are the factors that go into that? How is it that it fluctuates? And why did we have so much? And then, what's driving that number, please?
Yeah. So I can't speak directly to the why as to why we went from 20 million to 8 million. The way we submit paperwork for impact aid payments is similar but very different as our state revenue. So there's formulas involved, very complex formulas, several layers of formulas. But we do student counts, and the majority of our impact aid is related to military connected students. So those student counts, just like our student counts district wide, have been dropping steadily over time. We've seen a little bit of strength here just in the last year. But much of the volatility, to try to answer your question, Ms. Carol Hubbard, as directly as possible, much of the volatility happens when we receive closeout payments from prior years. So, for example, we're in FY25. Well, last year was FY25. What happened is we received a random closeout payment for a prior year, FY22 or 23, something of that nature. And so what we can't predict is those final payout payments that we receive. Congress is in charge of appropriating those dollars, and it's a situation to where, we're planning for the current year, and all of a sudden we'll receive a closeout payment for a prior year, and that spikes our impact aid revenue. So that's part of the volatility, but again, very, very difficult to track. You'd think it would be a very trackable scenario, and it just isn't.
Thank you.
Mr. Dorn?
Thank you. I'm thinking in terms of this category as fund balance. And so my question is regarding the health plan fund, which I'm assuming we're referencing the risk management fund. Is that correct? Okay. So question on that, am I correct in my understanding that the premiums we pay on behalf of our employees and that our employees contribute, that goes into that risk management money?
Yes.
And then all the claims are paid out of that.
Correct.
So no matter how many people you have in there, it's whether it's a plus or a minus at the end of a year is based on how many claims you have, really.
Correct.
Or
Compared to
how much money comes in.
Correct.
And so we had, looking at it, it appears we had lower claims than we might have otherwise experienced.
Correct.
My question then, with that understanding, is that risk management fund, and what I understand, we bank it actually with the borough. Is that correct? That money, once the premiums are paid, that money is there for claims, not for operational costs.
That is correct.
So even if that increases on a given year, we cannot take money out of that to shift into operation.
That's not correct. And technically the district has access to those funds if it needed those funds or made the decision to access those funds. But we don't make a habit of doing that.
Could I do a follow-up or two?
Follow up, Mr. Dorn.
Okay. So if we did take money out of that to pay for claims and we had some high claims that depleted that fund, then we would have to take money from operations to cover those.
That's accurate.
And do I understand when we calculate the premiums, which we do in coordination with an insurance manager who knows this business, that may, if we have a large dollar amount in the claim side to ostensibly cover projections, the premiums could go down, just as if we depleted those funds, the premiums would need to go up.
That's correct.
Okay, so it's really an insurance pool that we're talking about.
That's accurate.
That though technically we can access, but in terms of insurance best practices, you need to have a fund
Correct.
to pay claims.
Yeah.
But
That's
if we don't have too many, we can lower premiums, which will help on the cost side because we don't have to pay as much. It helps. Okay, thank you.
That's accurate. Yeah. Adding, there's a lot of nuances and layers. It's more than an onion. It's a big onion to this fund balance topic, specifically to that health plan increase of the $5 million. This is what occurred is we approached year end, and our consultants, they're constantly in the risk fund. 35 to 40 million dollars passes through this fund a year, so it's not small dollars, it's big dollars. And health insurance is the largest, anywhere from 32 million of that 35 to 40 is health insurance. We have large claims in the district, so small number of employees are what's considered large claims after they rise to a certain level. And once one claim gets above the $500,000 mark in the year, we have stop loss coverage to step in and take and reimburse us. It's insurance on insurance, right? Does that make sense? And there were a large number of claims in the hopper in June that were noticed that were on large claim situations. And so our consultants pushed through a significant number of outstanding claims to take advantage of stop loss coverage that was going to expire. It's just like a deductible on your own insurance. It expires at June 30 and restarts on July 1. And so a huge portion, I don't have the number, I'll get it, but their message to us was a big number of that 4 million and change dollar amount of claims that went through in June was securing reimbursements from our stop loss coverage. And so, that action caused us to be reimbursed and caused us to retain more dollars in our risk fund, but it was the right financial thing to do, to take advantage of coverage that we pay about $1.5 million in premiums a year on that stop loss coverage. And so several layers to this, but yeah, I would agree 100% with your characterization of, the nature of those funds and what they're there for, and what we'd like to continue to accomplish with them. Ultimately, the goal to keep employee premiums as low as possible for as long as possible.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go to Ms. Hull, then Ms. Doolian, and Ms. Carol Hubbard, and then Ms. Hewitt.
Mine's a quick one. So as we're going back to federal impact aid, and looking at this FY27 budget, are those numbers? Oh, it's on. Oh, it's just not close.
Closer.
Thank you. Okay. So FY27, looking at this budget, federal impact aid, are these assumed numbers or these actual numbers?
In the budget, yeah. So these are estimates, projections of what we anticipate to receive. Yeah, not necessarily dollars we've already received. But we've updated those numbers to reflect the last 2 years of actuals that we've received. We've taken that into consideration to make that projection.
Ms. Doolian.
Thank you. So you've already walked us through the actions. I'm really curious about the actions that have been taken by the administration when these funds were accumulating, and what we've done in our fiscal year 27 budget that help reduce the possibility of a blip like this happening again, because this is a $10 million net positive position that added to fund balance that I can see here through these reasons. Nobody could have predicted this. I want to talk I want you to tell us a little bit more about what we've done in health, not only this year, but next year, um, around using potential funds to not only what Mr. Doran just walked us down, pay claims, but have we done anything in regards to lowering premium costs for our employees this year and also projected for next year? And then the other question would be, what have we done this year and also next year to capture savings on the front end for vacancies, which was that third one, that third point. Thank you.
Yeah, so we'll get into several of these points further in the slideshow. I will just preemptively say what we've done to address the single biggest item we've done to address number one is reduced our benefit rate tied to health insurance coverage. So the dollars that go into the risk fund are generated by a rate that we charge each dollar of salary that's paid out. So it's referred to as the benefit rate. We've reduced that by 4.5%. That's a savings to our FY27 budget of approximately $4 million. So important to note that two of these three items are directly benefiting the FY27 budget. We've adjusted impact rate aid revenue up, and then we've adjusted that benefit rate to address the health insurance surplus by, again, 4.5%. It's about $4 million of savings. I'm trying to track the additional layers of your question, Ms. Deland.
Vacancies.
Vacancies, yeah, and we'll talk about that as well. We're just shy of a percent assumption on that. It's right in the $1.4 million range
Is that, just to clarify, are you talking about this year or next year?
in the FY27 budget.
Okay.
This year it was just around $1 million. Yeah, right around $1 million. So we ratcheted up slightly the budgeting for vacancies. And we'll talk about that. It's on a subsequent slide here in the presentation.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Thank you. I'm curious about the stop loss issue. Is the stop loss, are the values categorical, or is it an overall number? Like I guess maybe I need to, do you understand what I'm asking you? Like, do we have a maximum of claims? So like if everybody is turning their claims into one pile, when it reaches a certain dollar figure, is that when the stop loss takes over? Or so do we have a maximum risk, I guess is my question.
I will attempt to answer this with the ability to come back and correct myself tomorrow. As far as I understand it, it's on a per claimant basis. Once a claim reaches a single individual claimant surpasses $500,000, it's a dollar for dollar reimbursement on that claimant's claims with no ceiling. However, I'm not aware of a total health insurance liability ceiling for the district, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm answering your question. We have stop loss coverage on individual claimants, but I'm unaware of a total district liability stop loss coverage.
So can I follow up? Okay, so just to kind of put that into perspective. So if we had, let's just say, 200 people who had $500,000 medical expenses in any given year, we would have to pay that amount before the stop loss kicked in.
Correct.
So, okay, and so to Mr. Doran's point, that we have this fund there, which needs to, that is the insurance. Okay, thank you.
Correct.
I think that's clear.
That answers
Thank
your
you.
question. Okay.
Ms. Hewitt.
Is the risk fund allowed to carry a balance?
Yes.
And what is that?
So the borough ordinance doesn't get into capping funds individually. It's a total cap that includes 6 different funds, and one of those funds is the risk fund.
Thank you.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you. The risk funds in particular, the which are I'm going to assume here that we have a little bit of a snowball happening, and correct me if I'm wrong. In 2024, I'm just trying to understand how we got here. In the fall of 2024, I remember that health insurance premiums went up for employees, and we had people leaving our health insurance plan because there was an increase in health insurance premiums. Is that correct?
I would say it was a combination of that and total FTE reductions district-wide in budget.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
it does.
So a combination. But yes, I would not deny the fact that that was a factor of increased premiums.
And we did not know about that premium increase until we were already into last year's budget cycle.
Yeah, we knew about that. It occurred in, was it September of 24, I believe.
Okay. And then, so that's happening in the fall.
Mhm.
In December, we made a decision to outsource night custodians. And that night custodian outsourcing, you're saying is, to my understanding, under the lower cost from custodial service contracting, the $2 million savings, it's my understanding that custodians started leaving their position, understandably, because they know that their job is going to be outsourced at the end of the year. They leave their position early. That creates a vacancy savings.
Correct.
Okay. But is it also true that the outsourcing of custodial and custodians leaving their positions early would also create unintentional savings in healthcare plan enrollees? Because when they leave our district, they're also leaving as an enrollee.
Absolutely.
So we had we had custodians leaving their positions early, which then created a snowball in 2 of these categories.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. And the question around the risk funds of the $5 million total savings, am I understanding it correctly? And is it fair to say that that pool of funds that are in savings are employee contributions by way of their premiums?
Not necessarily. Those are charges to the general fund that the board has approved. Administration has recommended, the board has approved through the budget to go funds to be transferred from the general fund to the risk fund for the purpose of paying employee claims.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Doran.
Regarding that third point of lower costs for custodial service, it appears to be connected here to the contracting, but if I'm following the conversation, that $2 million in lower costs was, since we were in contracting in the last fiscal year, was actually the reality of having a shortage of personnel to fill the positions.
Correct.
Okay. So they were actual positions that were needed. We needed that work, and we got lots of reports that schools greatly suffered in terms of the services, people working really hard to cover bases, but things went on. So that is really not a contracting savings as it is a in terms of our lower costs last year,
Reduction in
as it
cost.
was a reduction or lower cost realized because of high vacancy rates.
I would say that's accurate, yeah.
And if I could have one more, this is my last one on this slide.
Go ahead, Mr. Doran.
Just a point of clarification because it was mentioned earlier, and you may want to wait until we get a little further down on fund balance calculations. But you mentioned funds that are involved in the borough, and actually the impact aid is explicitly in the ordinance excluded.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Complicated topic. I feel like I need to make one more statement as it relates to the risk fund. And, we're certainly going to have the question, oh, well, why didn't you know in advance? And we're starting, the borough handles the transactional day-to-day basis of this fund. We don't even have it here in-house. We have the general fund, we have transportation fund, we have food service, equipment replacement, et cetera. We don't have in-house the day-to-day transactional activity of the risk fund. And so we're starting to talk with the borough about, hey, we're going to be accountable for this. We want to see, and not that they're holding anything back from us, but what we're finding out is the nature of risk expenditures and revenues is very delayed, probably to the tune of approximately a 2-month delay on when claims are begun and when they're finally realized on a ledger at the organization. And so when you're talking about a 2-month delay in getting good information, it just becomes difficult to be able to accurately anticipate in advance, let alone even at the time they're happening, as the good information that you can count on and rely on and use to project comes in several months later. So the scenario that I described where we received reimbursements from our stop loss coverage, when did that happen? That actually happened in August, September, 2 to 3 months after the fiscal year even ended. And that's the cutoff. And so just really difficult to accurately predict when large structural changes are happening to a fund that handles a significant amount of dollars on an annual basis. So just wanted to point that out and for context so people can better understand the challenges.
Ms. Julian.
Yeah, thank you for talking a little bit about that because it's helpful to understand where that money is coming from and also the complexities of the timing of getting the accurate numbers. For comparison's sakes, other districts that are self-insured, and I'm assuming that this is related to our self-insurance.
Correct.
Okay, so we are a self-insured district. Do other districts that are self-insured have similar pots of money that I'm sure I shouldn't say those, have similar risk funds that pay for employee claims?
Yes, with balances at year end that carry over. Yes.
Does the state characterize that as unrestricted fund balance?
That's not included in the state calculation. Any dollars in our risk fund is excluded from the state calculation.
And that calculation is in statute?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Dorn.
I know we need to move on, but just a quick thing. The borough is also self-insured, so they have a separate risk fund.
Correct.
Have one. They run them the same way, but they have a separate one.
Correct.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yep. All right. Moving to now, so we've talked philosophically about fund balance, talked about the reason for the increases. We'll look real quickly at the actual numbers. So the state calculation, there's 2 different calculations to make an already complicated topic even more complicated. So this is the state calculation. We're holding approximately $20 million in fund balance as it relates to the state. The targeted range per policy is between 12 and 20, so we are at the top end of that range. And then the borough calculation that we've also been talking about includes these. There's actually 6 funds. Capital is there as well, but we don't have dollars there, so it's not listed. So these are the 5 funds that we're looking at. Food service is shown at 0 because this is unrestricted. So there are restricted dollars available in the food service fund. There are federal dollars for the National School Lunch Program, but they aren't counted as this is simply an unrestricted look. So 22.8, you might be noticing, well, wait a minute, the slide prior showed 20. Why is it 22.8 here? Another unique factor, trait of the borough calculation is they do not allow us to subtract out our year-end encumbrances. The borough calculation does not allow us to subtract out our year-end outstanding purchase orders or encumbrances. So at any point in time, the district has purchases that are started, just like claims are started. It takes a while for them to go through the process. We have purchases that we have begun, official purchases, but they haven't been finalized. At year end, that total amount of begun purchases but not finalized was $2.8 million. They are counting that in their fund balance calculation. That money's long gone. It was spent many months ago, and they're still counting it in. So that's the difference between the $20 million state calculation and the borough calculation of general fund. 800,000 in the transportation fund, 2.8 million in the equipment replacement fund. We have about $1 million and a half currently being planned in student devices for the current year that will bring that number down. And then we're going to begin looking at staff laptop replacements in FY27. And we're attempting to get away from 100% purchase district-wide. We're going to try to get to where we're doing, it's on a 4-year cycle, typically, our staff laptops. We want to get to where we're doing about 25% of those each year. So we'll begin making purchases in FY27 of getting away from a lump, balloon purchase and getting to a spread out laddered purchase. So those $2.8 million there set aside and planned to be spent in the next year and a half. And then the risk management fund that we've been talking about there at $8 million. So that makes up the total borough calculation, 34.6, the total of those funds.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Okay, I'm not sure how to ask this, but I'm gonna, what is in your opinion, what is the philosophy, I guess, behind including all of this? Because if the state doesn't include it, why, I guess I'm curious, why does the borough put that in there? And why would we, I guess I'm not clear on the risk management being in there either. That doesn't make any sense to me since that's our insurance policy.
So I'll go ahead and take this one. Dr. Meinert can pick it up because I've been looking into the history of this borough code. And honestly, this code has existed in one form or another since the 80s, is what I learned. So it's difficult to go back that far and ask what the philosophy of those folks who put the ordinance together at the time were thinking. What I do know is that it's been modified at least twice in the last couple decades. 2009, there was a modification and I don't recall specifically what it did. I'd have to look back at the ordinance and the code before that time. And in 2018, it was modified again. The amount was actually increased in the 2018 modification to 40% from, I think it was in the teens, 18 or 16%, something in there. So that 2018 ordinance actually was helpful for the district because it allowed us to save more in some ways, but I'm not 100% sure what other modifications were there. But I do know there was a lot of discussion around the time because we had kind of a similar year where of unexpected funds. There may be more history to it that I am not aware of, and I'll leave it there and let Dr. Meinert speak to it if he'd like to. But I do know that it seems to be, there are other boroughs in the state that have similar ordinances, but this one is a little bit more specific in that it rolls in more to the total calculation compared to the other ordinances that or codes, section of codes that I've seen in other boroughs. Dr. Meinert.
So we're only aware of one other borough that actually has an ordinance more restrictive than what the state statute says. Most other boroughs have gone away from any kind of individual ordinances at the local level and have said, hey, the state has great oversight on school district budgets. It not only is approved by local school boards, the borough assemblies definitely have an eye on it as they're giving their local contribution. And then it's actually accepted by the state as well. And then school districts go through an auditing process. And so I can't necessarily speak to the intent in terms of why so much is included in the borough calculation. We just know it's much more restrictive than what's allowable by the state.
All right, we're going to go to Mr. Dorn.
Through the chair, perhaps a request for information that may be helpful to us and to the public. If we could, under the borough calculation, we have listed out what counts to for allowable funds. If we could have a similar, how do we calculate the state cutoff point? I think would be good information so we could really see them and understand them a little bit side by side, what's included on one and what's included on the other. And the borough calculation is fairly clear what's there, but
So,
just to that informational request.
Mr. DeGraw.
yeah, what I could do to provide that information is I could update this slide. Where'd it go? Yeah, I could update this slide showing the nuts and bolts of the state calculation. It's much simpler. It's solely focused on the general fund. It's 10% of general fund expenditures, and then they subtract out impact aid, restricted non-spendable amounts, which are things like inventory, hard assets that aren't liquid, allotments for our correspondence students are subtracted, things of that nature. So, but yeah, I could provide that general description of the state calculation for tomorrow's presentation.
I think that would be helpful since we're comparing the two. And if I could ask another quick question.
Go ahead, Mr. Dorn.
The other question I wanted to ask is, you were talking about the borough calculation does not include year-end encumbrances. I'm thinking
it does include.
I'm sorry, it does
Yeah,
include.
yeah.
That's right. It does include. That's what I have written here. Thank you for correcting me. But my question really plays in terms of the equipment replacement is, so we had equipment money. I don't know when those, would they have been caught up in that year-end encumbrance? I'm thinking, in June, we know we're getting, or sometimes with computers, those types of equipment you can order them and they could take a couple of months to actually get there.
No.
Was that a factor?
I'm not aware of significant outstanding purchases we had in the device realm at the end of last year.
Great, thank you.
Can I add
Dr.
on to that?
Meyer.
I think your question is good, though, Mr. Doran. As those of us that are have been in the school district, have worked in the school district or other governmental organizations, end of year spending, there's oftentimes kind of a flurry of activity that happens at the end of a fiscal year. As schools are closing out, they're planning for the next years, and they're able to see exactly what their budgets are at the school level, at the departmental level, at the district level. And if there's end of year funds available, then we try to spend those end of year funds to benefit students for next year. And so at the end of the year, there is a flurry of activity, and as Mr. DeGraw said, millions of dollars that could be unprocessed at that point in time in terms of them actually being closed out on the books by July 1st. And so that's why you would see, $2 to $3 million potentially in that range, and that we feel strongly shouldn't be necessarily included in a calculation for fund balance, because those are dedicated dollars that are already technically spent.
Ms. Julian?
Thank you. I want to ask a clarifying question, and so please ask if I'm not being clear enough with this question. But if I'm recalling back to last June when we met in an emergency meeting, we passed a budget that assumed that the governor's veto would be overridden in August, which is 1 month into our school district calendar after contracts are done. It's my understanding was that assumption, if the governor's veto hadn't been overridden, would that have been a $4.5 million? Okay, so then this is my question. Isn't it then also true to say that in this current year budget, we had an unanticipated savings of $4.5 million of use from our fund balance because, in fact, we actually passed a budget that assumed that held us to using $4.5 million of fund balance to put our operations forward. Because so I would say that on top of this this $10 million blip, we also, as a school board, made a risk decision in June that was a plan to spend $4.5 million in fund balance, and that also didn't happen.
If the governor's veto had not been overridden.
That's correct.
Correct. Correct.
So there's a missing $4.5 million unintentional savings, I'm going to say. That it's not just money that came in. We assumed. So I'm talking about what's the starting point here? And if we're saying that our starting point was always here, no, in June, we assumed that we were going to potentially use fund balance and draw on fund balance to balance our operational budget this year if that governor's veto hadn't been overridden. And so there's also a calculation that needs to be factored in here because we as a board made a very intentional, risky decision to put forth a budget, whereas other big school districts like Anchorage did not do that. And then they had to roll back, increase class sizes. And if I can recall, in August, we're trying to hire educators back, which disrupted schools. Isn't that true?
That's accurate, 100%.
Okay.
And I'll just take it a step further. At the beginning of the cycle, so yes, the board took a risk of assuming the veto would be overridden at the expense of fund balance if it hadn't been overridden. Dr. Miner and I began the budget cycle with assumed revenue in the proposed budget, even to provide additional continuity from the beginning of the budget cycle to the very end. And that's not necessarily a strategy and an approach that the district has always used. And so there, when you're talking about potential savings that the district might realize and might be certain of in September, and we're dealing with revenue uncertainty to the tune of, up to between 4.5 and as high as $8-10 million. Yeah, it certainly creates a scenario where the district can't count their chickens until they're hatched. If I were to grab a slogan. So yes, your characterization of that and of what we did is accurate, and of what other districts did, because the staffing stability and certainty certainly didn't exist in several high-profile districts around the state last year.
All right. Thank you, Mr. DeGraw.
All right. So moving to the budget process timeline, probably mainly for new board members, just kind of a calendar in the process of events going forward. This slide is what we've already done. We've stood up the budget committee, did good work there, and then Dr. Meinert and I worked with district leadership to establish department level budgets to create the proposed budget through December and January. And then we're at the beginning of this slide now. February, we're presenting the proposed budget to the Board of Education. We'll do a presentation at the regular meeting tomorrow. Typically that's shorter because we'll have gone through our meeting tonight. Through the months of February and March, the board will now quote unquote work this proposed budget, take feedback from stakeholders, from the community, staff, parents, et cetera, and take that feedback and incorporate changes that you would like to make to the proposed budget. You'll finalize your work towards the end of March, and then we're required to provide what's called, you'll approve your recommended budget. So the proposed budget, in a sense, kind of administration's budget. The recommended budget is the board's budget, in a sense. We'll send that budget across the river to the borough on April 1. And then the main component of that budget is the local contribution request. So you guys will debate that, deliberate that, establish a local contribution request. The borough will receive that and incorporate that budget into their budget. So it's might be the single biggest line item of the borough budget, the local contribution. And so they'll do their work through April, and then it's typically the second week of May where they often finalize their work and incorporate that and establish an official local contribution. If it's exactly what we request, oftentimes there aren't many changes to be made from the recommended budget to the final third version, which is the approved budget. There might or might not be changes if it's exactly what we asked for. If it's less, likely we'll need cuts or adjustments. If it's more, then there's oftentimes additional items we can add into the budget. And that would typically happen through the month, the remaining parts of May. And then in a normal year, we like the board to be done sometime the first or second week of June. But lately that hasn't really been able to occur because of the delay in getting good information from the state on revenue. So, and then my office is required to provide the official budget document to the state by July 15th. So that's the general timeline that we follow. And yeah, hopefully we'll see a smoother calendar this year than in past. So the goal of our budget this year, the proposed budget, is to provide a high quality education to students through the efficient allocation of limited resources. So it's a good budget, but we wanted to point out we still are limited in nature. This budget certainly doesn't restore everything that we've cut the past several years. So we still are very limited on our resources, considering what we've had in the past and where we're at today. But we want to allocate those precious resources in as efficient as a manner as possible. When we start the numbers process, we usually have to make assumptions because we're ahead of the game and we don't know everything guaranteed in advance. So we're assuming a base student allocation of 6,660. I think this year is probably pretty safe to say that that's what it'll be. The governor did not propose any reductions in his preliminary budget that he put out in December, so that's a good sign. We're projecting a decrease of 158 students from the actual count this year, from 11,200 to 11,042 next year. And then we're assuming a status quo local contribution of $62.78 million. So those are the three main assumptions that are built into our revenue and expenditures in the proposed budget.
Mr. Doran.
Thank you. Just a question. I think your assumptions, I'm comfortable with all of them. One question, though, is in terms of the BSA, the base student allocation. I think that's a good assumption that it'll remain the same. However, what we have seen, and was our case last year, it was the line item veto of the actual appropriation for that by the governor. And that was what was actually overridden by the legislature later. And I appreciated Ms. Dillion's elucidation of that situation, because I think it's real fun. But that is something that we should keep at least in the back of our minds, lest the legislature passes what it is, but we won't know for up to a month after the legislature finishes its budget as to whether we would actually be getting that or not. In in keeping enough in fund balance to cover us as we did in passing our budget last year. It was the governor who cut the appropriation for public education that would have cost us, and we said in passing our final budget
Oh.
that we were we would draw from fund balance rather than create chaos going into the coming school year at that,
Yep.
given the timing. Sorry, probably more observation than a question, actually. So,
I
Thank you,
agree
Mr.
with
Dorn.
that characterization. One on that topic, at the risk of belaboring the point, I think advocates around the state are looking at how can districts get additional revenues outside of the BSA, and so there's revenue that comes through the BSA, but there's also things like transportation revenue that hopefully we advocate for an increase too, and that coincidentally would directly benefit the general fund if we could get an increase in transportation funds. So there's other ways we can kind of chip away at that funding dilemma at state level.
Mr. Dorn.
relative to that, could you remind us that how much did we have to project our subsidy for transportation in this year's budget?
Current year was $2 million.
And what are we projecting for next year?
We'll get to that, but it's $1.2 million. So it's
Thank you.
dropped. Thank you. So our preliminary budget surplus that we established at the very beginning of our process was approximately $2.6 million. You'll notice the two items there that were main factors in increasing the fund balance amount are factors that directly benefit the FY27 proposed budget. And my assumption at this point is these two factors will continue, hopefully, to benefit future budgets. Now, that's not to say that we won't drop into a deficit. There's a number of different factors that could still create us going into a deficit in FY28, but these two items, my expectation is they'll continue to benefit budgets going forward.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you. Can you state, and I can look at this in the budget book, but if you're able to remember, what is the total revenue for for impact aid that we have projected for fiscal year 27?
We'll look at that in a couple of slides.
Oh, we will.
Just
Okay.
shy
Well-
of 16 million, somewhere in the 16 million range.
Okay, good. I'm just tracking my overall assumptions here. And then
Okay.
the expenditures, will we go over that total amount?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yep.
So then just
We will go over that.
hold my questions till later.
Mr. Dorn.
Two clarifications on this slide. The 2.6 million surplus, that would be how much we would have left at the end of FY27. So that's our backup monies, or we're expecting an additional, be able to add to whatever we finish at the end of this year.
So that $2.6 million surplus was a direct product of, at a very early stage, estimating projected revenue and comparing that to our projected expenses at the beginning of our budget process. Very preliminary. Here's what we expect revenue to be for FY27, and here's what we expect our expenditures to be in FY27. So nothing to do with fund balance here. Quite simply projecting revenue and projecting expenditures.
And if I may, is that assuming that expenditures are the same as last year's budget at that point?
Yeah, expenditures were pretty much status quo, but there was there's some reduction in expected expenditures, however. So staffing, we update staffing costs, 100% update. So they were generally speaking, I can say they were status quo.
I suppose my question is, if the line items in the previous year's budget were the same, that's what you're basing that difference on between expenditures and?
Yeah, but there's a lot of updates and changes. So we meet with every department in the district, and their budgets, certainly their requests are changing. And so,
Okay, I guess what I'm getting at is this is before you've made the adjustments that you're gonna look
yes,
at coming
yes,
down the rest
before
of
we
this
make
presentation.
significant investments. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Doran?
Okay, you prompted another question within my question, but I might hold part of it. So this surplus on this slide has nothing to do with FY25 or FY26. So, just for those who are listening, might not have seen your head nod.
Yes, yes.
I am correct.
Correct. It does not have anything to do with
This is
25 or 26.
only within FY27.
Correct.
And so, in a sense, when we do get looking at the budget, revenues higher than expenses, we may have some room for that being part of our considerations going forward.
So administration has grabbed that surplus and is now using it for planned investments that we have in this budget that we'll talk about. So we're presenting our final proposed budget as a balanced budget with no surplus. I'm just talking about the beginning stages of our budget process and establishing that we have a surplus this year. Usually in years past, it's a huge deficit that we're reporting. And now this year, it's actually a surplus.
So within the proposed budget, which is where we're not at now, not where the whole process started last fall, but where we are right now, that 2.6 is part of the basis for the proposed investments.
Correct.
Okay, so it is not a surplus within the FY20. It is already accounted for.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I think we need to be real careful about that. And then I have another question on this slide, but you can put me back in the queue.
Ms. Julian?
Thank you. I have the exact same line of thinking to Mr. Doran. I think that this and this is not meant to be a criticism, but when we're talking about surplus right now, I think that right now what I'm seeing this as is like a net positive position, not necessarily a surplus, but this is just a net positive position of which we are starting. But this is not, you are not recommending a fiscal year 27 budget that has a net positive position ending in 2.6 million.
No.
Okay,
No.
great.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
So again, in years past, it's begun. Last year, this said $16 million deficit, and that led to all the reductions that we had. All of the reductions that we made in the budget eliminated that $16 million deficit. On the flip side, this year, we're starting with a surplus, and now that's going to lead to the investments that we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes to balance that budget. It's a balanced budget. It always is a balanced budget.
So in this case, though, I think that what we're trying to get at is that the word surplus is just means if we're leaving the programs, the staffing, and everything that we set in the previous budget cycle, we leave that all the same. Because expenditures are expected to be lower, we're looking at having 2.6 million left over based on that comparison of expenditures. That's leaving everything more or less status quo in terms of line items in the budget or
Generally speaking, that's
programming and staffing.
yes, that's accurate.
Okay, so thank you. Mr. Doran?
Other clarification on this slide is the revenue box indicates higher impact aid, but is listed as a negative, and I'm confused by that.
It's just a tick or a hash mark. That's all. Not intended to be a negative. Bullet point.
Okay, but that's not, it is a negative sign.
I agree. It's confusing.
We'll change that to a bullet point for sure.
Okay, yeah, I would suggest then somebody looking at it, if it's a bullet point, it should be a bullet. If it's higher, rather than have this dash, which is, then I would suggest make it a plus. But in any case, it's a confusion.
Okay.
So, but
We'll
you
clean
answered
that up
my
for tomorrow night.
question.
All right, what's on the next slide, Andy? I mean, Mr. DeGraw.
Thank you. So we'll jump to our revenue in all funds. So this is taking into consideration all of the listed funds there. Total budgeted at 228 million, just shy of $229 million compared to last year, current year. That's a $4.3 million total decrease, mainly in the operating fund and transportation funds. Specifically to general fund revenues and expenditures, we're at 194,339,000. That's a $3.4 million decrease from the current year approved budget. You can see the percentage breakdowns there of each of the three buckets that we receive. You'll notice a fourth little sliver right there, other revenue. That's we have budgeted approximately $2.3 million of fund balance utilization in the FY27 budget. So just shy of 60% state revenue, just shy of 33% local, and then about 8% federal.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Thank you. Can we look at slide 13, please, where you said that that there was a 4.3 million decrease, and you said that was mostly transportation?
So it's about 3.4 million in the general fund dropping, and then the other million roughly is transportation, I believe.
I'm curious about that. Have you already explained that? Did I miss it?
Not necessarily. That would be directly attributable to budgeting for fewer routes, more realistic route number in our budget based on what our contractor is able to provide.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Doran. Ms. Julian.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned something, and I think it's important that we also back up to something you said earlier, because it's understandably fund balance is just such a pervasive topic right now in many of our heads. So, which is understandable. So, you said previously that in this year, right now that we're in right now, that you're doing a draw on fund balance of $1.5 million to replace student devices. No, did I not capture that correct?
Yes, out of the equipment replacement fund. Yes,
Out of
that's correct.
Great, perfect. So we can when we're looking at the end position for fiscal year 25, and we know that we have fund balance right now. We are using fund balance right now, even this year, on things like equipment replacement and also lower premium prices on insurance for our employees.
And transportation and food service could easily go into the negative. Yes.
Like, for example, we have used that food service fund in previous years to pay off student debt that from students who were not able to cover their costs for breakfast and lunch.
Yeah, oftentimes we don't necessarily use dollars in the food service fund. We'll use other dollars, but typically the food service operations runs a deficit.
Yeah.
Compared to the revenue that they're able to generate. So historically, the district has had to subsidize food service, but we haven't for the last few years because there was a year where meals were free and reimbursed district-wide to all students during COVID.
Yes.
And so that generated a significant fund balance that we've been able to draw in the last couple of 3 years.
Okay, perfect. So we are drawing on fund balance right now, but in this fiscal year 27 budget, I just captured it here. You said that that the fiscal year 27 budget, you also are recommending in this budget that we also draw on additional $2.3 million to produce a balanced budget in fiscal year 27.
Correct.
And
Specifically out of the general fund.
and are those funds are there enough this is my fiscal conservative question, are there enough one-time expenses to the tune of $2.3 million where we wouldn't be setting ourselves up for failure in future fiscal years, assuming that we have $2.3 million from fund balance to cover something this year, but if we don't have that fund balance and $2.3 million in next year, can we still pay for it?
Yeah, my position is that we feel comfortable with that level of fund balance utilization based on how much we're holding right now, that we could continue those expenditures into the future comfortably.
Okay, thank you.
So I think we wrapped up the general fund revenue summary on 15. So specifically within the general fund, looking at the three different buckets, we're funded through three buckets: local, state, and federal. Local revenues are projected to be status quo. As I mentioned earlier, our proposed budget includes a status quo local contribution request of $62.78 million. And total local revenue at $63.8 million. Other things like rentals, we get rebates from utilities here locally. We receive rebates from our P card purchase program, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the main other local revenues we receive. State revenue, we're projecting an $8.7 million decrease, mainly related to lower student enrollment, as well as higher assessed valuations here in the borough actually decrease our state revenue. That is off, those declines have been offset. We are benefiting from a hold harmless clause. Here's the unique twist. It's not related to school consolidation. We actually went into the territory of benefiting from hold harmless related to student enrollment decline. And that's a better hold harmless clause than the school consolidation clause. Total anticipated revenue dropping $8.7 million to $112,300.
Mr. Dorn?
Okay. So we're clear. Could you explain, you just mentioned the assessed valuation of which is there's a minimum amount that's taken out of the state's payments, that it's actually the borough paying that. I don't know the exact figure, but it's high 30 millions. So that doesn't increase or decrease our, has no impact on the state BSA revenue to us. It's just where it comes from. The borough pays part of that, the state pays the bulk of it. And so when we look at status quo local contribution from the borough, that if it stays status quo, if property valuations have gone up, we actually are really receiving less operational funds.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
By way of lower state revenue, yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's an important thing that often is missed within our community.
Ms. Hull?
Thank you. I just had a question about the hold harmless for the low enrollment. I know that we'd had a conversation before about hold harmless and how with the school closure that was a multi-year plan to help the school district financially. Can you explain the hold harmless for low enrollment, and does that help our district?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the way the student enrollment decline hold harmless works is they take the number of students that it kicks in at 5% if you lose 5% or more of your student enrollment. And on the surface, I'm not sure if we hit 5%. Where it came in is it's solely related to brick and mortar students. So we increased in our homeschool numbers. And so they're just looking at, so the raw drop was actually bigger in in-person students because we increased in our correspondence numbers. So once it surpasses 5%, the hold harmless kicks in. The first year, it credits back 75% of the students you lost. So it's a 3-year step. 75% the first year, it credits you 50% the second year, 25% in year 3, and then it's phased out completely by year 4. So that's a better, we generated more dollars with that hold harmless than the school consolidation. Dr. Ott and I went through that process quite a bit, looked at the numbers and confirmed them and went that direction. So did I answer your question?
Follow up, Ms. Hull.
So just out of curiosity, let's say in year 2, we see a substantial increase in students. Would
Mhm.
that year 3 just,
They take the base year, which was last year's count, is the base year. So if we surpass that number, if we went back, then it would stop. But as long as we stay under, they're going to credit us back the difference based on that percentage. Does that make sense? Cool. It's kind of complicated stuff, but good question.
Ms. Julian?
Okay, so I can't do math as fast as you, Andy, but Mr. DeGraw, but what I'm seeing here is that we potentially have 2 years of 5% or more drops relatively close to one another. So are we potentially in a scenario where we are where we have multiple hold harmless clauses? I know that we have hold harmless on enrollment, but it looks like we might have already triggered that multiple times. So is it compounding? And do we also have hold harmless from the closure of the recent school closures? I know that answer is yes, but I think that what would be helpful is to kind of see a characterization of the totality of our hold harmless that is in our favor that will be not in our favor relatively soon, because it would be reasonable then to say that in future budget years beyond fiscal year 27, what's the rate that we're losing hold harmless, and how much might we need in different reserve funds to help us so that we don't need to make operational cuts that could hurt us very quickly from one year to another.
Yeah, I would agree with those statements, Ms. Julian. Just to clarify, a district can only capitalize on one hold harmless at a time. So in relation to the school consolidation hold harmless, we were in that realm. Once we hit the 5% mark on enrollment decline, we looked at each one and compared them because we can only take advantage of one. So the student decline hold harmless was more beneficial. We selected that, and the school consolidation hold harmless disappeared.
Follow up, Ms. Julian?
Okay, but a follow-up to make it so that I'm not just focused on money. If we were to have an increase in student enrollment that then lost that hold harmless, that's okay because we receive funding on a per pupil basis, and that's a good thing. So it's not that I'm
Correct.
saying that I want to have hold harmless. I'm just saying that we need to project that if we're not at a plateau and we do keep going down, I don't want to be I don't want to put future boards in a position where we don't have any fund balance, we lose all the hold harmless, and we reinstate potentially programs this year, and then 3 years down the road, we're looking at cuts again. So I understand how much of a magic 8 ball this is.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. And just, I think your point is when we're in the hold harmless realm, our enrollment is being, and funding is being artificially upheld. And there's a kind of a soft landing, so to speak. But each year we're going to go from 75% to 50% to 25%. And so if we kind of just continue on this path that we're on, yeah, we would see significant additional state revenue declines going forward. I think that's your point, and I agree with that.
Mr. Doran?
When would we expect to know what the minimum local contribution is based on the property valuations?
We have that number right
We
now.
have that.
Yep.
Okay. And follow up with that. So that number, whatever it is, when we look at this slide 17 in state revenue, the foundation funding section of that actually includes the local contribution, the minimum local contribution.
Say that again, Mr. Dorn.
So the foundation funding piece of this pie,
Mhm.
112 is, or 85% of the 112 actually includes the borough minimum coverage of that?
So when our final foundation funding is determined, the required local contribution is subtracted from the basic need. So I would put out there that it doesn't include the required local because it's subtracted. We establish a basic need. And just for the public and board members' edification, it's page 12 of the budget. So it shows a required local contribution of $41.6 million. It's not in the presentation, but it's in the official budget document. So I would say, in relation to your question, Mr. Dorn, it's actually not included because that amount is subtracted from our state funding. So it really does exist in the local contribution, both the local the required minimum, and then the amount up to what they provide to us, which is the amount beyond the required local.
Okay, follow up. So what you're saying that on slide 17, the state portion, if one was to take the BSA and the multiplier and our students would come out to this, or this minus what's required from the local?
Yeah, so when you go through the multipliers, you take our enrollment, you go through the school size, the SPED, the CTE, the geographical factor, apply it to the BSA, you come up with a number of 142 million and change, just shy of 143 million. Then the required local contribution is subtracted from that, as well as deductible impact aid, those two items.
Okay, so this 112, well, 85% of that is basically that 142 plus minus the 41.
Yes, correct.
All right, thank you.
All right, so jumping to federal revenue, I think Ms. Dooling had a question on this. Total federal revenue of 15.8 million, just shy of the 16 million. That's just shy of a $3 million increase from the current year budget. And there's some JROTC payments as well as some Medicaid reimbursements in there in that federal. But 98% federal impact aid. So then pivoting to the expenditure side of the equation, this slide articulates how our expenditures have been budgeted in the proposed budget in relation to function. It's called function. It's basically category. So you see various different categories there: instruction, special ed, school admin and support, et cetera, all the way down to student activities. So different categories and the corresponding percentages there to each one. There's a state report. We talk about a state report that we had to do in the past that Fairbanks always scored really well on. The minimum requirement was to spend 70% of your general fund budget on student instruction related categories. That's the first 5 categories there. And the number this year is just shy of 80%. So that report's not required anymore, but we still track it just for curiosity's sake, make sure we're upholding a good standard, and just shy of 80% is a really good number. So, and then pivoting to expenditures by category, so salaries, benefits, contracted services, supplies, equipment, and other. about between 84 and 85% of our expenditures are personnel related, specifically to wages, salaries, and benefits. So jumping to a summary of investments and restorations, again, very favorable budget. First time in my time here at the district that we've been in this kind of position. So pretty exciting, actually. So our main investments are in the realm of lowering class sizes, lowering PTR, which is equivalent to adding classroom teachers, hiring additional classroom teachers. So in the elementary ranks, decreasing PTR from 26 to 23. On this next slide that shows the number of teachers hired as a direct result of that lowered PTR, 21 FTE classroom teachers in our elementary schools. We're restoring instrumental music to our elementary schools, and that would be 8 FTE instrumental music teachers. We're proposing additional supports, 1 FTE at Barnett, 1 FTE district-wide ELP teacher, and then an additional FTE dedicated to general ed pre-K at 2 different elementary schools. And then 2 FTE classroom tutors at a couple of our non-Title I elementary schools. We're proposing increased supply budget, specifically a 25% increase to those discretionary supply budgets at elementaries, and then adding before school care supports at our elementary schools, a total approximated cost of $250,000.
Ms. Maple.
Is the 1 FTE Barnett teacher, I think we had reduced by 2.5. Are those covered in the PTR lowering elsewhere?
So
or
that's beyond the PTR reduction. So they'll likely, I don't have the exact number in front of me, but they probably benefited from 2 additional teachers, 1 related to PTR, and then this is outside of that. This is additional add.
Okay, so it would put them closer, theoretically around 0.5 lower than pre this year's.
Where they were, it might still be 1 point. If the total was 2.5, it's getting away at that 2.5. So I would say it's probably closer to, they're still 1.5 off.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Hull.
So I have 2 questions that are on this slide. So the 8 FTE instrumental music teachers, what elementary schools would that be? All our elementary schools would benefit from that, including Salcha, or is that just?
Good question. Might defer to Ms. LaPlante on that.
So there's a couple different ways that we could model this out. One important factor is that we're trying not to recreate a pullout program. So this isn't necessarily going to put full band and full orchestra back at 4th and 5th grade, but we think we could probably do instrumental music for 5th grade to increase the number of students that are able to go from elementary school to middle school and still take band and orchestra in the middle schools. So depending on what we have models for 4 teachers, 6 teachers, and 8 teachers with support for, I think, all the elementary schools. If you get at 8, we probably can include Salcha. If we get at 4, things like Salcha might have to be a different consideration for how we give them support.
Ms. Julian. Oh,
Thank you. I'm going to ask a little bit about music as well, and then you can put me back in the queue and let others go. The 8 FTE instrumental music teachers, when did we cut instrumental music from our budget? If anyone can hearken back.
I mean, it was we were reducing pre-COVID, and then I think after COVID there was a complete cut because for about a year, once the 6th grade moved to the middle schools, we were still doing 5th grade at the elementary schools, and then I think we stopped that completely. So it's been a multiple year reduction, and this would be a new add back.
follow up, Ms. Julian.
Yeah. So then my follow up is, do we feel like there are at least 8 full-time equivalent instrumental music teachers who we could recruit in for if we put this in our budget?
I'll take that. I mean, I think that's the question I've gotten since Thursday when people are reviewing this and they're curious about that. And since we haven't put this forward in probably 5 or 6 years, I think it's a bit unknown. But I don't think that should detract us from saying, this is a value that we feel strongly about, and this is something that we would like to have for elementary students, that we don't go out and try our best to recruit instrumental music teachers. I do know that we have some elementary music teachers that are currently teaching general music that are very interested in transitioning back to instrumental music. And so we'll see where it goes. I've been very pleased seeing the amount of teachers that UAF is producing in their elementary music program. And I think, depending on all of this proposed budget, if we start to see the board give us direction that they would like to invest in PTR, they would like to invest in elementary music, then we can start that recruitment process. If we wait until an approved budget to really hammer this down and say, we're not sure about some of these things, if we're in June and we're not pulling the trigger until that point in time, then it does become very difficult in terms of starting that recruitment process.
Mr. Doran?
Okay, thank you. First, I really want to say thank you, and you noted it, Andy, in your tenure here so far. You have not seen a budget where it has not included cups, and it goes back quite a number of years prior to that. We've virtually every memorable budget has included cuts, and this has additions. It has the investments, and I give the administration great kudos on that. And I think starting as you did with possible PTR, which does reflect the efforts of the state to say what the state would envision for public schools, is the great starting point there. I want to frame one of my questions in here was in terms of, and it reflects here and on the secondary is, especially with the number of classroom teachers increase, do we have the staff? How do we recruit new people in? And we need to, it really would require recruiting new people. So as you answered the instrumental music teacher question, I was reframing this in my mind because I know one of the factors in cutting that elementary band and orchestra at the time was because those band and orchestra teachers were winding up covering more schools. They had, at one point they covered 3 schools, and we were pushing 4 or 5 schools. I think maybe someone might have approached 6. I don't know if it was that high, but definitely we didn't have enough teachers. So if the indications are we're seeing more opportunity there, you talk about the university, et cetera, that same thought process, and maybe you have some insights in terms of availability of significant increase of teachers for the classroom. I do feel strongly that you're right in saying if we don't envision and kind of shoot for the stars a little bit, then we won't get there. Especially if this doesn't happen until June, we really can't do much with it. I'm reminded of when Governor Frank Murkowski was in, and the legislature and business people and educators and others throughout the state came to the A+ task force and kind of a gentleman's agreement. We were approaching the ceiling. We were getting back up where we could start envisioning and looking at investments. We got to that ceiling, but we didn't get through it at that time. This is getting through that in some ways because you have some new things here, like the before school care. But I am really concerned about the labor pool opportunities so that as we get those expectations, as this process gets finalized, um, that indeed we have a threshold that they're within reason. So I don't know if maybe you could add beyond the instrumental teachers, the what's the current environment for possibilities of recruiting new classroom teachers?
It's a great question. I mean, I think we still continue to be in a challenging environment in terms of recruiting teachers, not only within the state but nationally. But I think it is interesting. I mean, just last week we saw Anchorage is poised to potentially lay off 500 educators, and so we might have a big pool of educators here in the state looking to make a change and come up to Fairbanks. And so there's certainly that. And then, to speak to instrumental music specifically, I think offering something is better than nothing, which is currently, the situation in most of our elementary schools. And so Ms. LaPlante has had some great conversations with elementary music teachers and some of her advisory groups and how we could structure things differently so that teachers aren't burnt out and trying to cover 5 or 6 different schools and repeating exactly what we had done in the past. And so I think we can be flexible if we get to the point where we budget for 8, but we only end up landing 4 or 5 in year 1. That's still a success. More students are getting an introduction to instrumental music, much more so than they are now, and it gives us something to build upon for future years. But the landscape for educators is a tough landscape. All public schools within the U.S. Are trying to get the best and brightest to come teach their students.
Follow up?
Follow up, Mr. Dorn.
And if you could address, um, if we're able to get these PTRs, especially at elementary at this point, I would assume that that would be, where would that place us in terms of other districts in our state and what you see nationally or here nationally? I'm just thinking that a state that has 45 as their PTR versus coming to 23 or 30 could be a very attractive thing. But ideas, if you've talked about them, how we use that as a recruitment tool.
I think it's a great question. We haven't necessarily done that analysis, state and nationwide. I think we're in a very unique position that I see many districts this budget cycle in particular facing possible PTR increases due to a number of factors. But certainly it becomes a recruitment tool nationwide and within the state if we can say we're in a net positive position and these are the types of environments we're trying to provide for our teachers, and we know it's helpful for not only students but teachers having lower PTRs in our classrooms.
One more follow up, Mr. Dorn.
So jumping on that, attractiveness to perhaps families coming to Fairbanks. I'm thinking military families who often looked at us as a prime district to come to for usually our services. But in terms of this as a proactive piece that would attract families, not only in the military, but industry, and attractiveness for perhaps families who have been concerned about growing class sizes and have homeschool but might be interested as our class sizes if we're able to accomplish this in the budget?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. The media certainly loves highlighting huge deficits, and we've seen that in past years that on the front page of the paper, we announce these huge deficits and there's all kinds of media attention around it. And I think that possibly detracts from those families that you're talking about because when they Google our district, that's what's being pulled up. And so I'm hopeful that we'll get the same amount of media coverage in terms of these restorations and reinvestments back in our school district so that in the year to come, as families are looking at Fairbanks, they can see that we're reinvesting into our district and that there are lower class sizes, that there is instrumental band and music available at their elementary schools, that we are putting money back into our gifted and talented program. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this is a great recruitment tool for families potentially moving here. And then also, as you noted, correspondence students that are within our borough that have tried something else, potentially because of larger class sizes in the past, maybe wanting to come back because we are offering a great education at not only our elementary schools, but all of our schools.
Okay, I have Ms. Hull, then Ms. Maple, and then Ms. Doolian.
I have two questions, so if you could put me back in the queue for the second one. So I just wanted to ask, so we talked a little bit about recruiting music teachers, and we might have a potential for 8. And it says here 1 ELP teacher. And I am just curious, what ELP teachers, what special education that they've had to gain in order to be an ELP teacher. If
I believe there is 1 or 2 courses that a teacher can take to become qualified to teach ELP, and they can often do that while they are in that job, just like other teachers can get the qualifications, if they are close enough to that. So I'm not overly concerned about not having somebody that's able to do that, because that's something that over the many, many years, we've had teachers that want to transition from a regular classroom position into ELP, and they take the courses that they need to within the 2 years.
Ms. Maple.
Would this be an appropriate time for me to ask a request another cost associated with something for the elementary schools? Or does that need to wait for other meetings?
I think it's definitely an appropriate time, either now or as we close out the conversation today, thinking ahead for future work sessions. What are things that the board, 1, would like additional information about, or 2, would like to see added to a list for recommended budget, whether that be in balancing act or however we're going to facilitate those conversations. So yeah, I think it's appropriate.
I was wondering if I could, then I would like to request numbers on what it would look like to make Salcha whole again, just so we can have that concept, have a number associated with the concept, as we are been hearing from that community.
We can do that. Yep.
Ms. Doolian.
Okay, thank you. I want to first thank the administration. As the chair of the budget committee, I'm going to read from the budget committee memo that was dated January 20th, 2026. The committee views the current PTR levels of 26, 29, and 32 as not ideal, recognizing that smaller class sizes positively impact both student achievement and staff well-being. They urge the board to adopt the state's recommended PTR each year as a starting point for the budget, and then to make deliberate budgetary decisions to deviate from that PTR if necessary. So what you've put in front of us tonight is exactly what the budget committee listed as the primary priority. So thank you for listening to that. And I am incredibly pleased to see that the PTR, and I'm going to say the word, the pupil to teacher ratio, or the class size targets, are reflective of what is now in state statute, as passed this June by the adoption of House Bill 57 into law. Thank you for doing that. I would highly, speaking from my experience and my seat here on the board, this would be the priority that I heard from educators, families, military representatives. Everybody has said this. Why? To Mr. Doran's point, we are always competing for students. Now, I'm going to say I drew a tree here, and this is what I'm going to ask the administration to consider. In going one more down in elementary PTR to 22, what would that look like? Why am I saying that? Because we have major competition within our own district by our charter schools holding their PTR for mostly kindergarten through 8th grade, because most of our charter schools are K-8, at 22. We know that that is one of their primary selling points. I know that as a parent. I hear it when I talk to anybody who wants to attend a charter. One of the primary reasons that they go is because of small class sizes. Now, we know that perhaps it's not possible for us to bring every single elementary school down to 22. We have a chance right now to add back, to talk about adding back instrument music at all of those elementary schools, which none of those charter schools would have. But the reason why I'm saying that is because I'm less concerned about drawing back a workforce to classrooms that we make manageable. It's very disheartening to hear that Anchorage is poised to potentially lay off 500 teachers. That's devastating news for the state of Alaska and for students across Alaska in our most populated area. But I'm thinking about how we can potentially draw people back into our district, which is also a priority of the budget committee. Lowering class sizes ensures that there are fewer student behavior issues, and we heard that from educators. Lowering class sizes also might encourage, to Mr. Doran's point, families that are military connected to actually come here and enroll in school because they know that they have really good class size options. It also, so I'm seeing the military as being a really big potential recruitment pool for us. Charter as being a recruitment pool for our neighborhood schools. Homeschool, especially those that homeschool with students that are also in our SPED or have IEP plans, potentially coming back because, again, those behaviors are going to be better managed. And then also villages, with knowing that knowing the high amount of population that comes in from the villages, and also knowing that Anchorage, if people in villages have family in Anchorage and Fairbanks, but they know that Anchorage is in crisis and Fairbanks is in not, hopefully we can also attract students there. So I'm more comfortable now with I'm going to call it a risky projection of enrollment that isn't quite as severe as what we are looking at if we can do these things. So that adds up in my mind. My question to the administration is, you've said a little bit, you've hinted at pulling out certain aspects of the budget and moving faster on certain aspects that would be in relation to personnel so that we could start on recruitments earlier and understand if we're actually going to meet those targets. What does that look like, knowing our budget process?
Yeah, so specifically what that would look like is getting some level of certainty from the board on their support for certain components of the proposed budget. You know, what's safe to carry on to the recommended budget. In years past, just for context, especially for new board members, we've typically, especially because of revenue uncertainty on the revenue side, we've been hesitant. There's been an unknown related to class size that stretches through the whole process up to late March, even April, even into May and June, last year, because of that revenue uncertainty. If we can get assurances and support, we know we can start the recruiting process earlier than normal and really get at, seizing the moment, so to speak, on the recruiting trail and getting, it's not hard to read the articles and see, every other Big Five district and virtually every district in the entire state is still in, dire straits from a budget perspective. And so if we can get a level of certainty we haven't had in the past, where we might have had to wait to recruit until April, we could move that up to February, And so I'm kind of just spitballing, but giving you kind of the general idea of, yeah, we could, not a certainty, but we could certainly move that timeline up. and benefit from that from a recruiting perspective.
Okay, so I've got myself in the queue, followed by Mr. Doran and Ms. Hull, then Ms. Carol Hubbard. So I wanted to put my full-throated support behind reductions in PTR. As you're just discussing, I think we can go ahead and express our opinions on some of those things to help the administration get working on these. So I'll express that. I also would like to explore, as Ms. Maple said, what it looks like to restore some positions to SALTCHA. I'd like to both look at the scenario of what it would take to make them a full whole again, but also consider targeted add backs there for particular positions, maybe in conjunction with the head teacher over there, Mr. Hoy, to determine priorities.
We have SALTCHA on our list.
Great, thank you. And I think that was it for me. Mr. Doran.
To better understand these, and I like these investments as listed. I don't need to get into it now, but I know there are other possible investments, and we'll keep coming up with several, and people will write to us about them. But in understanding those possibilities, could you tell us a little bit about really what has changed to enable this environment for us? Because on one hand, we're projecting decreased revenue, but we're expanding our services. So if you could give us a better picture, how can we add all of this when we're projecting less revenue next year?
Yeah, so the main differences there in the budget, Mr. Doran, would be lower expenditures on that side of the budget. Again, the main item being those health insurance claim projections being dropped. That provides stress relief to the general fund through that benefit rate that we talked about. And we'll see the benefit rate here in a couple of slides, the specifics there. But that's the big one. On the revenue side, we're seeing, again, the federal impact aid increase. And then, you know, it's stated a couple of times in the budget document, and I don't think we've said this at the table yet tonight, but we can't discount the hard decisions that were made, I would say, the last 2 to 3 years, and the difficult, you know, I have a tremendous amount of respect for board members over the last couple of 3 years that you know, were in the line of fire making hard decisions. You know, as we celebrate a budget that's investing, I don't want to lose sight. I know nobody wants to lose sight and diminish those difficult decisions that were made. But those difficult but needed decisions that were made structural reductions to the district that were needed based on our enrollment declines, and provided known savings at the time, and then are continuing to provide what I like to call soft savings. Those are the savings that are more embedded and hidden in the 20,000 line items of budget that we have, that those savings are going to continue to be seen. We've identified, you know, health insurance being a large one, but there's others there. So I would say a way we got to this point, we have to talk about those difficult but needed decisions that have been made over the last couple of 3 years. And kind of, I would say it's resetting the table is the slogan I would use. We've reset the table in the absence of necessary state funding increases. We made hard decisions where other districts haven't done that. And I think that's the big difference. I know that's the big difference. I don't think that is the big difference. So I kind of a ramble there, but I tried to answer that question the best I could. It's a multifaceted response to that question.
Right. No, I appreciate that, and I think you're covering a lot of bases. How much has been drawn from general fund in order to fund this proposed budget from fund balance?
Approximately 2.3 million.
Thank you.
Ms. Hull.
So first is a request. I would like to see what it would look like to have two FTE ELP teachers. That's my request. Oh, sorry. Two FTE ELP teachers is my request. And then my question is on the before school care, the 250K. Which elementary schools would benefit from that? Is that, again, all of them or as many as we can touch?
So I'll attempt to answer and maybe have additional information from Ms. LaPlante or Dr. Meinert. The intent is as many, if not all, elementaries that we can implement that at. That was another request and talked about extensively at the budget committee level. And so I think it's important to us that we feel it's another feature that could draw students back to the district potentially. And so our hope is that as many elementary schools as possible.
Yeah, and the level of service and the times will be configured, at a local level with principal and the staffing that they have available. But it is our hope and intent that all elementary schools will have some kind of before care service available for their families. And can I ask a follow-up, just clarifying question? So in ELP, we currently have three elementary ELP teachers. We have one in the proposed budget. And so you're asking for two additional on top of the one that's in proposed budget?
I'm asking for a total of 5 in our district.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
So that makes sense. Yeah.
Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I'm super excited about the investments. It's nice to be looking at restoration. The teachers at Barnett, did we have, was it minus 2.5 last year? And if that's it, I would just be curious to see if we could do plus 2.5 instead of plus 1.
We'll look back at exactly what that was prior year and get an answer to you, Ms. Carol Hubbard.
Ms. Hewitt.
I was also going to ask about the before school care because that's just such a huge need in our community, and I feel like a lot of families could benefit from that. But yeah, I also just want to put my full support behind reducing that PTR. That's a great investment and well worth being at the top of our list.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you. I'm going to say that out of the, other than the PTR priorities, which I also want to say align with almost every single strategic pillar in our strategic plan, including investing in our people, because the educators on the budget committee said that lowering PTR provides educators more opportunities with each student. So again, lowering class sizes across the board is the priority of the budget committee, which is a committee of our community and educators, and has been a priority for years. The other thing that I'd like to look at, though, is one of the unintended consequences, I think, that happened when we consolidated schools, and therefore our elementary schools have more students than they have in the past, because, of course, we're consolidating our resources and more students are in buildings, which is okay. It doesn't mean that we have more students in each class. Let's be clear about that. Class sizes have gone down, especially in elementary. But at the elementary level, I am concerned about those teachers that are responsible for the all. So, for example, what I'm concerned about is, are we supporting our counselors to the extent that they don't have as many larger class loads or student loads? And what are we doing to make sure that our counselors have the support that they need? And so that's a big question of mine in the elementary world. And I wanted to talk about, this has been a theme for me, but I just want to make sure that our counselors, we have them enough staffed. And so I'd like to just make sure that there's not a gap there in this investment area that we might be able to put in. And then the other one is, how do we invest in our non-title schools to help bring up some of the disparities in regards to how schools are funded and the amount of staffing they have versus our non-title schools. And in particular, I'm asking because the Alaska Reads Act and the Walk to Read programs at our title schools are tremendous because there's a whole heck of a lot more adults in those buildings because of title funds. But for our non-title schools, they are stretched a little bit to be able to offer those small scale interventions. And I just want to, and even though those students are thriving, I want to make sure, are we catching everything? Are we really serving those students well? So thank you.
I can.
May I address at least one part of that? I just want to speak to the, I agree with so many things, and more people is obviously going to be helpful. When it comes to the lowering the class sizes and increasing, so lowering PTR, that also will help with the Walk to Reads at the non-title schools. So because the teachers at all the schools are also part of the whole program. So that is a benefit to the Walk to Read programs. Additional staff, I think, would also be beneficial, but those are choices that we have to make. I think most of our schools have historically been at these types of numbers before. I think some of the things that have been noticed and felt differently for our counselors is the consolidation of some of the special education programs, and also that the needs of students have changed over the last 10 to 15 years. And so they are experiencing a little bit more students with higher social and emotional needs. But it's not just because the numbers are changed, because we've certainly had schools at these elementary numbers before. Jim Doran's nodding his head. So it's not just the increase of numbers. There's just a change that's happening in general, and that's definitely on our radar. We haven't ever had more than one counselor per elementary school in my 20 years here. So that would be, some of the things that we have done is for our large schools that have high needs is we've added another student behavior support technician, and what we're doing these days is we have some the assistant principal. So those are some of the things that have been added, but I also know that there's a need for some guidance to the counselors.
Okay, that is, I think, the end of my queue right now, unless I'm seeing any other hands. So I think let's go ahead and take a short break. We've been at it for a while now, so is 5 minutes sufficient, board? 5-minute break. Okay, we'll be back at 7:43 if I did my math right. right, we're gonna bring us back to order. So that ended up being 10 minutes for technological reasons. So 7:49, we'll bring this meeting back to order, and I will turn it straight back over to Mr. DeGraw.
All right. Thank you, President Burgess. We found the answer to Ms. Carol Hubbard's question on Barnett staff reductions. It was 2.5 FTE in FY26 that was reduced. So,
Thank you.
all right, moving on to secondary schools, reducing the PTR in middle school grades from 29 to 28, and in grades 9 through 12, a decrease from 32 to 30. I think the 30 number is also the target in statute, so that was intentional to do that.
Yes, that's correct. At the secondary level, so the way that the statute reads is they break it up in elementary and secondary. And so you'll see our middle schools are actually under that mark for the state level. And then these PTR reductions are bringing high school in line with what that state statute is asking for.
Excellent. So moving to investments in the secondary, the summary, that equates out, those PTR reductions equate out to 8.6 FTE in the secondary ranks. And then just as in elementary schools, we're increasing discretionary supply budgets by 25% at all secondary schools. Pause here.
Ms. Hull?
I'm sorry to put you on the spot. But I wanted to bring up an idea that I'd heard floated around, and also this is mentioned in the budget committee memo under some additional comments. And so I'm just going to ask about SALCHA and the potential that it might have to be a K-8 school. Is there a potential there? And obviously this is something that probably would have to be in the works for a little bit longer than this budget cycle, but is there a potential for it to be a K-8?
I'm not sure that we're prepared to answer that question this evening, as that's the first I'm hearing of it. And so I'd need to consult with my team to see what kind of logistical things we would need to potentially make it a K-8, both not only within the district, but at the state level, and then, bring that forward to the board and see if that's something that they would want to invest in.
Thank you.
Mr. Doran.
We've recently had a report on an effort regarding Hutch doing specific recruitment to increase part-time students there. And in terms of the secondary investments, I was wondering whether that was just so recent that was presented to the board, although I know they're recruiting, and we've talked about the fact that they're going to middle schools, high schools to do a pitch to increase those part-time students. What impact that would have and what we need to put into consideration, and maybe that still needs to be worked out, but that was a thing on the secondary investment side that appears to be not yet noted.
Yeah, it's not noted in our proposed budget, although they would benefit from the PTR reduction. And so, they would see potentially some sections of classes added back due to that PTR reduction. We'll get to it later on in the slide deck, but that was noted as another possible option that the board might want to consider if you are wanting to either expand opportunities for part-time students or expand pathways. Then additional staffing at Hutch could be warranted. We're comfortable with the proposed plan in terms of the amount of staffing we have now to accommodate for part-time students. But of course, just like any other school, if they have additional teachers, then that can provide additional sections for students.
I'm okay with that for now, and that is further conversation. Great, as we go through. Good.
All right, moving on to district-wide investments. We're looking at adding 1.5 FTE health assistant. This, I think, primarily would be a roving health position to be able to fill with vacancies at the various schools around the district on a daily basis. And then our military student support coordinator is currently funded on a grant that is expiring, and so it'd be shifting that position. That position is very vital to our assisting our military connected students in schools, and just that liaison activity between the military installations and the district is super vital. So moving that position over to the general fund as an investment, and then making a significant investment in curriculum. $1.2 million is, everyone's familiar, maybe not new board members, but in the last 2 to 3 years, there have been significant reductions in the curriculum arena. And so restoring that funding to make much needed curriculum purchases district-wide. And then a transportation subsidy investment. Mr. Dorn asked about this earlier. Current year, we're at $2 million. That was what was budgeted the last budget cycle, and reducing that subsidy down to 1.2 million. The main reason we're able to reduce that is kind of related to a question Miss Carol Hubbard asked. I believe we're budgeting for fewer routes than we were the year before based on actuals that we expect to come in. So, and that's what allowed us to reduce that subsidy. On the reduction side, it's important to note that these aren't reductions as in reductions to services, to students, or to schools, or the district. They're simply reductions in our expenditure side that we've already talked about. So just showing those officially on the reduction side district-wide. Decrease to the benefit rate to reflect those lower health cost liabilities. And then an assumption, a budget for vacancies of approximately $1.4 million. So those two items providing significant relief and helping to provide the investments in the budget district-wide.
Ms. Hewitt?
On that transportation subsidy, was that the 0.8 savings from reduced routes? Is that contractual or just the state that we're in?
Yeah, so contractually, the contractor is, in our contract, we have a higher level of routes than what they're actually able to perform. And so it's that difference. Does that answer your question? So if they were all of a sudden able to provide significantly higher route levels or up to the contracted amount, I think it's either 105 or 110 routes that they're contracted out. Right now, we're running it consistently 80 to 90 routes. And so, yeah, last year we were budgeted for a higher number of routes than what we're budgeting for FY27. And that's how we're able to reduce that subsidy. The amount that we receive from the state for transportation is in the $2.5 million less than what we need for those transportation services. So to bridge that gap, we use a combination of this subsidy, and then we're draining down the fund balance, the cash reserves we have in that transportation fund.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Doran?
Staying on transportation, we would be reducing the maximum number of routes under the contract.
No, we are basing this on a reasonable expectation of how many routes we expect the contractor to be able to perform.
Okay,
So we're not reducing the amount that contractually they could be able to provide if they had the drivers, the staff for it.
okay, so if they had the drivers, we were able to increase the routes, which is reflective of the number we would like to see. And then we would have to factor that in.
Correct. Yeah, that's accurate.
Follow up, Mr. Doran?
A separate question.
Okay, I'll put you back in. Ms. Maple?
I just wanted to, once on the secondary investments, would like to see what the cost of making the part-time counselors at Randy and Hutch full-time counselors. So I guess that would be adding one counselor
One
position.
FTE, okay. And just FYI for board, we're compiling a list, a running list. Also helpful if you think of something to put requests in writing by email to Dr. Meinert, and that's always a helpful way to do that as well. So
Okay. I have Miss Julian next, then Mr. Doran, and then I'm putting myself in.
Okay, thank you, President Burgess. I'm going to go back to secondary. I was having a hard time consolidating how I was going to ask this question because it's related to secondary, but then also kind of related to overall. So, what I'd like to thank and also state publicly in this meeting is that the Budget Committee has listed investment in CTE programs supporting access and choice as being one of the number one priorities for investments. So, to the extent that, and so I've done a little, also a deep dive on Hutch and the reimagining, and also I want to make sure that any associated costs regarding the Hutch reimagining are in here. And one of the things, and this also kind of pertains to before care a little bit, so there's a thread, is looking at, I've had several, I'm going to call them birds, talk to me about a potential block schedule with our secondary schools, with our high schools at Lathrop, West Valley, and Hutch that would give a 15-minute break to allow a bus to run in a circuit several times a day to get students over there. Right now, it's my understanding in this part-time process with Hutch that right now that we've already implemented that we didn't have a lot from Lathrop going over primarily because of a transportation barrier and only having about a 7-minute passing period. So what I'm hopeful for is that we can ramp up our CTE opportunities next year and allow more students more access to career pathways. But if there is a potential implementation of a different schedule that might include additional busing, is that I want to make sure that we're capturing that in this budget. So that's my first question. And then also, if we are going to be, if there's any adjustments to scheduling, no, I'm just going to leave it there. So the busing potentially adjusting for secondary, and are all of those costs kind of associated when we look at investing in CTE?
Yes, but not necessarily the way that you just described it. And so
Okay.
currently, scheduling is done at the administrative level. Ms. Gillum has been working with all of our high school principals to determine the best path forward in terms of what kind of schedules allow for participation and access to CTE opportunities at Hutch, or some movement within the district. Currently, I don't know that there's a tremendous amount of support for 15-minute passing periods. When you play out the lost instructional time over the course of not only a day, but a week, that's a lot of minutes of lost instructional time for students. If you remember back to our Hutch work session, there was a proposal for a different schedule that would allow shuttles to run morning, at lunch, and after school, and would facilitate increased access to classes at Hutch, as well as not only CTE classes, but potentially some core academic classes as well. And so I would not suggest standing back up the every hour bus shuttles. I don't think that's proven to be successful. Even when we did that, I think there were issues with students trying to come over, and I think it sets us up for failure from the start, because our transportation network just doesn't necessarily run as reliably that amount of time every day, and all of the factors that get into like students getting to that bus, getting to the other school, off the bus, to class, like it just wasn't necessarily successful. So we're not proposing a re-implementation of that model, but really a redesign of sorts in the way that we offer those potential choices for our students.
Mr. Doran.
Has the fact that our custodial services contract will be coming up for renewal, rebid, and we don't know what that'll cost. Has that been factored into this budget, the proposed budget?
Yes.
Great.
There's an estimated amount for our expectation of any kind of CPI application to the cost. We've factored that into
Okay,
that line
and we'll
item.
be able to find that in here.
Yeah.
And if you can put me back in the queue.
Okay, so I had myself next, and I wanted to, so I guess back on the transportation discussion, I just wanted to point out that we are funded by the state on a per student basis for transportation, whether or not that makes sense.
It doesn't.
Thank you.
It does not make sense.
So just keep that in mind. I have heard some legislators kicking around the idea of going back to a reimbursement system, which historically, I don't know how long ago, but that is how transportation was once done.
04, 05 was kind of the ending of fully reimbursed transportation. So
Thank you. So just for the listening public, something to talk to your legislators about. And then I also wanted to express my support for increasing counselor positions at middle schools and potentially also looking at that at the high school level since we did reduce those positions last year. And I'll go to Ms. Doolian and then back to Mr. Doran.
Thank you. What is the percentage of, sorry to put you on the spot, Mr. DeGraw. I just wanted to see what the percentage of vacancy rate we are projecting if we go up to that 1.4%.
it's a little bit less than 1. It's a similar, I'm thinking Miss Nielsen is verifying this. I'm thinking it's 0.8 something.
Okay. Like a 0.8% vacancy rate.
0.85%.
0.85%. Okay.
0.0085.
Got it. Yes. 0.0085. Got that. Got it. Okay, good. I'm glad that vacancy rate is proving to help us be more granular. And this also, would it be, I'm very curious to watch how our projected vacancy rate in this fiscal year has helped us make any unnecessary reductions at the front end of this year. Yeah, because is it fair to say that we were able to maintain about $1 million in our budget in our current year, and now we're going to be able to potentially maintain about $1.4 million in our budget proposed for next year if we accept this? And is this still what you would categorize as a responsible way to budget personnel costs?
Yes, I would say that's accurate. And
Okay, thank you.
I grappled on this topic last year, and I graciously put that right back in. Dr. Minor and I both agreed to have that. And yeah, I mean, it's so long as there are vacancies, which we have had vacancies, that's a good, reasonable risk to take on. And yeah, I think it's reasonable.
If I can follow up, President Burgess.
Follow up, Ms. Julian.
If we have less funds in our fund balance, okay, if we have less funds in our fund balance by way of um, a lapse going to the borough, would you change the rate that you've put in for a vacancy?
Yeah, if we had fewer dollars.
Sure, yeah. If we had
Yeah,
fewer, I
so-
mean, the only reason we're able to do this, right, is because we have a little bit of a buffer.
Yeah, another reason for fund balance. So I failed to talk about these details earlier on in the presentation. 21, FY 21 and 22, our fund balance was literally zero in our general fund. So in those circumstances, I would have pushed, kicked, screamed to avoid budgeting for vacancies as we are now. But yes, the levels of fund balance that we have allows us the ability to do that and take on less risk. It's much lower risk doing that, because what happens if those vacancies don't come to pass? We have fund balance to be able to pay for them. So. And many reasons, just to hammer the point home, there's many reasons to hold responsible levels of fund balance, and that's a perfect example of allowing us the ability to absorb ups and downs in a responsible way.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeGraw. I don't have anyone else in my queue, I don't think. So we can continue.
All right, thank you, President Burgess. So a district-wide personnel summary, we do this every year. Top line is FY 26 approved budget, FTE, district-wide, followed by the FY 27 proposed budget FTE. That's an increase of 21.21 positions district-wide. Again, a majority of those increases due to PTR reductions, as well as the elementary music ad. So you might be wondering or thinking, I saw more ads of staff. Mr. Doran's already nodding. His wheels are turning. That's because of the lower enrollment. So if you applied the same PTR of the current year to a lower enrollment, we would have been cutting significant teachers. But we actually lowered the PTR, so we're adding back. So that's the difference. So, but yeah, so an add of 21 FTE district-wide, which is a good thing to see given the reductions of the past couple of years. A summary total is probably my favorite slide in the whole deck. So, yep.
Ms. Julian has a question, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ask, does this budget include in the personnel expenses, does it include increases for non-represented staff and personnel?
I'm not FTE increases?
No, I'm
salary increases.
salary increases. No salary increases for
No.
non-represented.
No.
None.
No. That's an important point to make. None of the FY 27 proposed budget assumes any cost increases related to negotiations that are upcoming, or does not assume for non-represented, specifically to your question. So.
Okay, then I'm going to ask a historical question. What has is there a responsible amount I don't know how to ask this question. I'm sorry. I won't ask this question.
All right, moving to the summary of investments and restoration slide. This is simply a compilation of those three prior slides showing the investments. Again, super exciting to not have one item on any list that reduces services to students or schools or staff. So pure investments in this budget, which we're very excited about, has the corresponding total investment amounts for each item. A couple of those items are accumulate Barnett and ELP teachers, pre-K teachers, tutors, just to keep the list to one page. But again, PTR being the single biggest investment at $3.6 million, the curriculum, and then the elementary music being the large ones. Total is 6.75 million in total investments in the budget. The difference between the 2.6 preliminary surplus and the total investments are the assumption of vacancies that we added in at a later date, and then the fund balance utilization. That's the difference, the added dollars that allowed us to invest the 6.75 million.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you. I figured out how to ask my question. What are the curveballs on expenses that could potentially hit us between now and June that will affect this next coming budget?
Yeah, so we're entering negotiations with 2 of our bargaining units here in shortly. We're hopeful to get initial proposals exchanged as soon as possible, but that certainly we expect to create some added costs going forward, starting in FY27 and then beyond. So unfortunately, the budget doesn't include any assumption. We're unable, historic practice, we don't assume any amount, currently with those negotiations coming up in the future.
Follow up, Ms. Julian.
Yes, thank you. And then we've had variances in, we know that healthcare costs are potentially going to increase. And is there any prediction that it will increase? If so, by any magnitude that you could state?
Are you talking just claims in general?
Claims and then the cost of healthcare, yeah, just total. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're seeing, so again, same talking point that I made before. In the same way, it's difficult to get timely information. It's also difficult to, predict what the amounts are going to be. The challenge is we're grappling with, the benefit is our enrollees that just in our open enrollment that just finalized, stabilized, so there wasn't a big drop from last year to this year, which was a good thing. But our per employee amounts are rising significantly. So per employee, the cost of insuring one person based on the claims district-wide is going up quite a bit. So we are working right now on doing what we can to try to, I don't want to say crystal ball, but like try to estimate what's actually happening as quickly as we can and sharpen the pencil as much as we can. But it's a challenge to predict, especially those health insurance claims. Doing what we can.
Mr. Doran.
Okay, couple of things just to note that 2.6, I think we did discuss it, is not a surplus, and we should, anyway, keep that in mind. Question, I'm going to pull 2 together. You had indicated when we were talking about the elementary investments that, and I had assumed that it was for all investments, 2.3 million was pulled from fund balance, and we have 6.75 on slide 28 of the cost. So that basically $4 million differential. And I'm sorry, you may have been explaining that, and I might have missed it as you were talking. So if you could address that, and maybe I apologize if I did miss it.
So are you asking, Mr. Dorn, what makes up that 6.75? How did we get there?
Yeah, how do we get that fund?
Generally speaking, the 2.6, the assumption of vacancies, which was 1.4-ish, and the fund balance utilization, which was 2.3.
Okay.
And all of those are rounded numbers, and that's how we get to the 6.75.
Okay, thank you. Related. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. So then my question is related to the next slide and what Ms. Julian asked, and the suggestions for some things that we might like to be able to discuss is other investments, some of which are on slide 29. There are other issues, other possibilities that are on the horizon. An additional school. We've also talked as a board and gave the administration a go-ahead to look at options within Two Rivers building. We are starting to get emails that say, oh, well, what about this? We like these investments, but what about this and such? Where are we looking at if there are other costs that arise during the spring that we need to be able to address? If there are ideas that we want to be, do we have funds to be able to address those, at least to discuss them, I mean, in total amount? Or are we starting to say, okay, if we add this to the investment list, we have to take this off the investment list? Or do we have some buffer for at least conversation purposes?
I think it's a great question, and I think there might be a small buffer to potentially add some additional investments without, taking things away from what's been proposed. Obviously, that depends on the level of whatever is being added. So we've started the process of building a balancing act tool for maybe the next work session. So, we've collected some ideas tonight, but you can see if you took away, an investment that we suggested within the proposed budget and added something else, how that would interact with the budget. But I do think that there might be a little bit of room potentially for some small additional investments. But I think it's wise to consider those curveballs or the other things we know that are floating out there that might also require a draw on our fund balance at some point in time, given the uncertainty of when those items might drop in the budget cycle.
Okay, thank you, because we certainly have issues out there that have been reported in the last couple of weeks that could impact this. And so that'll be important what our latitude is within this.
All right. So moving on, this next slide, we referenced it a little bit earlier, but articulates a few potential additional investments and or restorations. So we talked a little bit about CTE a while back in this meeting, items 1 and 2 there. I think Dr. Minor might have already mentioned that Hutch will benefit from that lower PTR, but then, if there are additional investments desired, we can look at that. Additional Barnett Magnet teachers, that was also mentioned by a board member. Additional high school counselors also mentioned. Additional, I think, reading supports by way of tutors, and then also SBSTs. Those are behavioral staff, SBST for folks not familiar with the acronym. And then HR onboarding has been a big topic around the district, especially in talking with our unions, and just as far as new employee support, that being a potential focus for additional investment, a staff member, somebody that would be solely dedicated to those activities, and then registered apprenticeships also being a possibility for additional investment. And as I mentioned, as board members have ideas or thoughts, it's always good to put those in writing and send them to Dr. Minert so we can process those and talk about them as an admin team.
Ms. Julian?
Thank you. Is this a good time to add additional ones? Okay, so I know that we are still potentially in conversation with Two Rivers Charter School. That's on the horizon, maybe not for fiscal year 27 in particular, but it would be nice to kind of have that in our back pocket of just an understanding of what the ongoing potential costs are of that, since that is a conversation that is still ongoing. The other thing that I'd like to potentially look at is, I lost my train of thought. You can put me back in.
Ms. Hewitt.
The registered apprenticeship, is that going above and beyond what we're doing with the teacher right now?
Yes, it is. Ms. Gillum, would you be willing to speak to that item?
Yes, thank you. So currently, right now, we're working in partnership with UAF and then the state of Alaska Indeed. We have a few registered apprentices this year, 2 serving in ESSA roles and then 2 that are serving in emergency certified teacher positions. An add to the budget in this circumstance would allow us to have more flexibility in terms of current staff members who would be eligible to be an apprentice but may not be in a student facing position. So in some cases, we have students in ESSA positions who would be eligible, but they're not in a student-facing position and thus aren't able to participate in the apprenticeship with the structured mentoring in an earn while you learn environment. Especially we've found in our secondary schools. Our elementary schools have just more student-facing ESSA positions with tutors and kindergarten aides and paraprofessionals. At secondary, we're really more limited, and so this would provide us some more flexibility in terms of both having apprentices in secondary schools or in elementary schools, and then also flexibility in terms of being able to have positions that we could use to support those staff members to be at schools where we would have strong mentorships and support for them to participate in that program.
Mr. Dorn.
Um, to, as we mentioned, tours as one of the things that we need to have on here. Charter or otherwise, Pearl Creek charter or otherwise, just having those there. On the Hutch, since it's particularly mentioned here as additional potentials, just want to note that, again, I look forward to the conversations around that and some of the ideas presented at that work session on Hutch. The only one that is actually fully implemented is part-time students because they've been part of Hutch. It's just continuation of those and modeling it in a way that makes that's been an integral part of the Hutch design and attraction. But where else it goes, that we have those conversations.
Ms. Julian.
Okay, I'm back. I got my train of thought back. Music. I do want to state that I was the budget committee also had this as one of the priorities for an add back, and again, this goes to really supporting access and choice, and also investing in our people. And there's a lot of different areas that it touches on our strategic plan. Also, though, I want to make sure that one of the things that's happened unintentionally, or as a direct relation to cutting elementary band and orchestra programs, I'm going to say 5 years ago. Yeah, give or take. Over around 5 years. Is that you have fewer students now who are in band and orchestra programs as they age up, and you have smaller sections, but we're really having to kind of look at how do we holistically support music, in a sense, with the student population we have now. If we reinvest in music education, elementary band and orchestra across our district, what we're going to do is then create a grouping of students who are musical, which is awesome because it is directly tied to math outcomes as well. And we are going to have more students wanting to take more band and orchestra as they grow up. So I want to ask the district, have you considered future implications of staffing up our music programs in middle school and high school? Because I would hope that we have more students who are involved in music in a few years if we make this investment now.
Absolutely, we've considered that. I think that would be a great challenge to have in future budget cycles. And as you know, there's hundreds of different variables that will change between now and those budget cycles, but it's certainly something that we've considered, and that is my hope, honestly. I hope that a generation of elementary students catch on fire for music education, and that, it grows in the middle school and then it grows in the high school, and then we'll solve that staffing challenge when we come to it. So it is something that we've considered. And, as we've start to build these plans and have conversations about it, I know Ms. LaPlante has had conversations with music instructors at all levels to determine how to structure some of these things to ensure that they're supportive of the ideas and the systems we put in place to serve our students.
Depending on how many of those proposed teachers come through, especially if we are able to go with 8, there's definitely been talk about using some of that to support the middle schools and the high schools to level out the opportunities at each of those schools, but specifically helping the middle schools so that they can grow those programs.
Ms. Julian?
Yeah, and one thing that I'd like to ask is, I know that we are now, school district in itself is a named beneficiary of the largest foundation, private foundation in Fairbanks. And that foundation likes to shine the light on Fairbanks. They have now adjusted in their bylaws to name us as one of the beneficiaries. So I wonder if there is an opportunity for the administration to potentially work with that private foundation and looking at what it might be to ramp that up. So. Am I being too?
Let's take a short at ease. One moment while we get our technology back up. All right, coming back from at ease, Dr. Meinert?
Can you repose the question?
Ms. Julian?
Oh, sure thing. So now that, so if let's just say hypothetically that there is a private foundation that wants to give money to the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District because we are investing in band and orchestra and they want to shine the light on us, could we accept philanthropic funds?
Absolutely. That would be
great. Thank you.
a huge help.
Now we're playing ball. Now we got it. Home run.
All right, anything else from the board here? Okay, back to you, Mr. DeGraw.
All right, thank you, President Burgess. Last slide before the question slide. Oh, is that
we're going to just have a moment of levity.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mr. DeGraw.
And I want to again start, I mentioned this before, but I think the first bullet point there, really want to focus on and not diminish the challenges we've had over the last couple of years. But at the same time, we talk about those challenging times. I think it was in response to Mr. Doran's question of kind of generally speaking, how do we find ourselves in the position we do today? That's half or more of the equation. I mean, you start with, to respond to the question, why the deficits? It's a lack of state funding that we all, I think, can agree on. And in an absence of that, what do you do? So what really has happened that brought us to where we are today is half the equation are those difficult, challenging budget cycles we've had over the last couple of years, making the hard but necessary decisions. And I used the term earlier to reset the table. In conjunction with that, we did receive a $700 BSA increase. And so every district in the state of Alaska has received that same $700 BSA increase. But you look around the state And have I seen any other district that's reinvesting in their students at this time? No, 0 districts. And so the difference really is, again, I'm beating the dead horse, but I can't overstate the importance of those hard decisions that have been made by the board in the past few budget cycles. So again, just it's setting us up and positioning us well, especially again compared to other districts in the state. That third bullet point, we were at our statewide business officer meetings in December in Anchorage. The whole state converges on Anchorage, and our staff, I lost count of the times my staff was coming back and like they were in this breakout or that session or here where there's all these other districts talking about their budget situations. And to a person, every one of us were kind of sheepish. We kind of just kept quiet because, we're not experiencing that. We kind of felt bad. We didn't want to, hey, what's Fairbanks up to? We didn't, want to kind of rub salt in the wound, so to speak. And so we really are in a unique position that's favorable. Again, curveballs often come and possibly will come, throughout the budget cycle. But at this point in time, we're really excited about the proposed budget that we're putting forward to, provide that excellent education, line up as many ads and investments as we can with the strategic plan, with recommendations from the budget committee, and do that within, again, limited revenue sources that, we're still not receiving enough from the state. Are we restoring everything that has been lost over the last 5 to 10 years? No, we're not. But we've reset the table and created a solid foundation from which we can move in an organized, systematic, calculated, thoughtful approach in adding back investments to best benefit kids the best we feel to do. So that's kind of my final thought, and I'll turn it back to Dr. Minor. Or, sorry, questions. But hopefully the approach we used of going through, took 90% or 95% of those questions, but stand for questions.
Mr. Doran?
Yes, we've covered 95% of my questions.
99?
But I have 2 remaining. Actually, going back to slide 8, fund balance by the borough calculation and our calculations of what's in the funds. In the general fund, you, Mr. Garr, mentioned that, reminded us back in 21-22 fiscal year, we had virtually 0 in our fund balance. We moved up to about the $3 million range we were talking about. And I think even last year we were talking probably winding up with 5 to 8 at the end of the FY25 going into this. We wound up with 22. I get the 2 million right away with the custodial, but how did we get from that 5 to 8, which was a projection, to 22 million in the general fund?
Yeah, I would start my response by saying really it's 20 from my perspective. It's not 22.8, it's the 20 less the encumbrances, because all of the information I provide is always going to have those encumbrances accounted for, subtracted out. And really it's back to this slide here, Mr. Doran. So, 5 million of that. We were at just shy of 14 is where we were at the end of FY24. And so we actually increased about $6 million. And the lion's share of those are the lower costs associated to contracting out custodial services and the additional impact aid. Anecdotally speaking, not anecdotally, I started looking in other areas, $500,000 lower in utility costs because it was a mild winter last year. Things like that. You had regular vacancies at a certain level. Our vacancies are going down, which is a positive. I think it's a combination of excellent recruiting efforts by our human resources department and then just lower FTEs because we've made so many staffing cuts. We're going to more easily fill the remaining positions that we have. But to answer your question directly, how do we get from just shy of 14 to 20? The majority of it there is impact aid and vacancies in the custodial arena.
Go ahead, Mr.
Follow up.
Mayor.
Okay. Then, okay, I'm going to link it then to the next. It might be a bridge, double question within that bridge. Because my next other question is, if we wind up lapsing an amount of money, I'm trying to think, what is that impact to, how does it affect our budget and our fund balance? There, because, and I understand the encumbrances, you are mentally factoring that in, but it doesn't factor into our calculation. Impact aid does, in the encumbrances do factor into what we might lapse.
Yeah.
But we need to, as we go through this process, this spring, that we keep in mind there might be 2 or 3 million that you're deducting from general fund moving forward, but we have to actually add to that. But the impact aid would not be, does not apply to that. So that would actually reduce the borough calculation of our fund balance.
So this slide 8 already has impact aid subtracted out. So that's already baked into the cake.
Okay, and I'm sorry, and it's just, maybe I'm not thinking correctly, but in terms of the general fund, that's now at almost 23 million, you said impact aid is in that.
So impact aid's not counted in that number right there.
At 22.8.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, perhaps either I can meet with you, or I think it'd be something that would be helpful to us as a board, and I'll go through the chair, whether it's individual or to the board, to give a clearer delineation of how that general fund at 22.8, how we grew from 14, a projected of 7 or 8, to 22, I think would be helpful in understanding the big picture.
So specifically to address the 7 or 8 number there, I do recall that was specifically a meeting before we had good indications. So we finished receiving impact aid sometimes as late as April. And so again, we definitely want to make sure we're grasping the timeline of all these things. So specifically,
right. I understand we get impact aid later. I'm confused. And if I'm the only one, I can meet with you individually, but the confusion is we went from an FY24 of 14 million at the end in the general fund.
Yeah.
And we wound up at 22 million. So I'm just trying to figure out how that, and we're looking at the borough calculation which excludes impact aid. So.
Yeah, we can get together offline and have a conversation.
Okay, and then just that question, if we do experience a lapse, what should we anticipate? And again, if this is something that needs to come back to us, what impact that would have, because it would reduce our general fund significantly. What impact that has on the proposed budget, and especially the investments or additional investments that could be made.
Yeah, so the impact aid situation with the borough, the lapse does not impact the FY27 budget. So we're hopeful we can come to an agreement with the borough and how we can utilize the dollars that might be lapsed to more directly benefit students. But for the board's information tonight, if that were to occur, that does not impact in any way the FY27 proposed budget that we've put forward.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Julian.
Thank you. But to clarify on that, if we have less money in our fund balance, we are assuming some risks in the fiscal year 27 budget that we might want to look at if we have fund balance. That's how I characterized a lot of my exhaustive questions.
Yes, I would agree. The risk increases as you make certain assumptions in the budgeting process as fund balance diminishes. Yes, I would agree with. And if that's your point, Ms. Julian, I agree with it.
Follow up, Ms. Julian.
Yeah, and then I think that it's important that I feel like since we're talking about this again, slide 6, 7, 8. There's a fundamental issue here. There's two fundamental issues. The state defines unrestricted funds balance in statute one way. All school districts in Alaska must comply with the state statute on reporting fund balance, and it's the same calculation for every school district.
That's correct.
Okay. Our borough has an additional ordinance that calculates fund balance and specifically defines unrestricted fund balance differently than the state statute.
That's correct.
Okay. So there's a definition discrepancy that could cost us $11 million.
That's correct.
Okay.
And
And then-
can I add a little bit of context to that? We're comparing the two calculations just real briefly.
Yeah.
This just came to me. The state calculation allows us to hold $20 million approximately in general fund balance. The borough calculation that adds up 6 different funds caps us at $23 million. So only allows us an additional $3 million and adds 5 additional funds to the list that they're tracking. So that's for context between the two calculations. $20 million cap in just the general fund on the state side. On the borough side, they allow us $23 million, 3 additional dollars in 5 additional funds.
Yep. Okay, and then to continue with that, thank you for adding that. Helpful. That is helpful. The other issue, to Mr. Doran's point, is we know that I'm going to speak. I'm looking at this, and this makes sense. We know where you're showing us. We see where the additional funds came in. Earlier in this meeting, I wrote down something that you said that I think is important for context as well, which is, I believe you said that I wrote it down here, in 2023, maybe that was correct, we had 0.
21 and 22.
2021 and 2022. Okay. So coming out of COVID, we had about $0 in fund balance. And that's indicative of a very fiscally responsible decision. I'm going to characterize it as a fiscally responsible decision in 2023 by the previous school board to make a concerted effort to build up our reserves again.
Correct.
Because at that point, when you're running a budget to 0 every year and you have 0 reserves, you have 0 chance at missing. And when we're talking about missing on budget, we're talking about laying people off in the middle of the year,
Yeah.
disrupting educational outcomes, and financially risking our districts. We're adding volatility.
That's accurate.
Okay. So To the extent that Mr. Dorn is asking for kind of an overview, like a historical of like how did we get here? How did we get from 14 million up to 20 million? I think it would be helpful to also go back a little bit farther to see what we've done to respond, what we've done, because what's different, what's nice about this conversation tonight is that we are probably the only school district in the entire state that is having a fun, lively, wonderful, great conversation around budget. Every other school district, I would say, in the state is having a deeply depressing, stressful, very terrible conversation around budget. But it's because I think of what has happened since 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, now 2025, that's put us in a position where we can have this type of conversation tonight. So that would be helpful because I think that context is important because some of the investments that we're talking about will also carry future implications. And to Dr. Meinhardt's point, I too hope that we have to grapple with making sure that we have enough music educators and math teachers, because their brains will click on, for students in a couple years. Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any more hands from board members. I'm gonna pause just long enough to make sure. Okay, so give it back to Dr. Meinert for some wrapping up.
Great. I'd just like to thank the board for the conversations this evening. It was exciting to provide this proposed budget to the board and community based on a lot of hard work from this board and past boards to get to this point. And so as you have different ideas throughout the budget cycle, don't be shy in sending those my way. We'll be sure to get that in balancing act and in front of the board. Also, if there are topics that you feel like you need additional information on based on the investments that might be in the proposed budget or things that you're pondering, please let me know as well so then I can work with my administrative team to prepare for upcoming work sessions to provide that information for the board.
All right. So yeah, just want to reiterate: get those questions and ideas out to the admin as soon as possible, please, board. It helps everybody out in the end to do that. And with that, seeing nothing else from anyone, we are adjourned. Thank you. Great work, board.